December 4th regular meeting of the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Harbor Commissioners. Can I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Brennan? Here. Commissioner Holsteiner?
Here.
Commissioner Carvana?
Here.
Commissioner Tucker?
Here.
President Bernardo?
Here. We are at public comments and questions, but what I'd like to do is, I'll do that, but I'd like to change the order of the agenda a little bit. I just want to push up item number 4 to the very beginning. So that will be first, and then we'll go into items 2 and 3, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So we'll move up 4, okay? So public comments. I have some public comments here that are numbered for specific items, and then I have several that don't have numbers, so I'm going to put those up to the top. Nicole, David?
Good evening, Commissioners. I understand that Little Pine Harbor is charging disproportionately high offloading fees compared to other harbors in Northern California. And I still remember a meeting in early September when Mike McKenzie and Larry Barcado urged the Commission to please reconsider those fees because they were not competitive and they were forcing some of the commercial fishermen to offload outside of San Mateo County. I think there are 70 plus family fishing businesses at Little Pine Harbor. Some of them have fished for actually 50 or 60 years here. It would be really upsetting to see them go because the majority of the board voted to adopt a policy that is not supporting the fishermen or the small family businesses. So in my mind, the fishermen are a very important part of the community that represents Willow Point Harbor, and that the community, part of the community that San Mateo County residents are very proud to have here. And the fishermen need the support of the Harbor District to stay in business. And so I would like to take the opportunity to urge the board tonight to take that into consideration when we discuss the offloading fees later on tonight in closed session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have Mr. Paul Muller.
Commissioners, good evening. First, let me say I thought there was going to be an agenda item today specifically related to the eviction process, which I do not see. And I'll make it short because it's already been a waste of enough of my time. I'm here specifically about one particular item, which is the eviction process that you all are using that is not in conformance with California law. I have suffered through it, my friends have suffered through it, and I'll make my comments short. You need to change it, you need to fix it. And if you don't change it, fix it, I'll continue to fight this until somebody does come in and change it and fix it. Very simple. You need an eviction process which does not intimidate people, which does not bully people, and which is in conformance with California. Fix it, or we'll get it fixed some other way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go, Darrell.
I have two speaker cards here that are not of any particular item from Brian Rogers, so do you want to come up now?
I have 2 different topics.
Okay. Oh, I see, right at the top.
Yeah, that's okay. That was more than items. The first one I want to talk about is the PRA request. I look through the reports and I see that a lot of people on the staff are working a lot, or at least are reporting that they're working on these PRA requests. Is there any documentation as to the amount of time being devoted to these, the number of PRA requests we're getting, the number that are completing in a week or a month or a meeting cycle? Because, I know it was discussed at one meeting a while back, it might be time to hire somebody to specifically address the PRA request. If it's taking more than 40 hours a week of the general staff's time, you're getting to the point where it needs to be an individual who just focuses on that and gets it done, instead of getting in the way of everybody else getting their job done. That was all I had on that one. And the other one was Robert's Rules of Order, which essentially I talked about at the last meeting. So I took notes on the last meeting and looked at it. Again, same rules are getting trampled on a regular basis, which is when you make a motion, make the motion. There should be no discussion of it beforehand. There should be no preamble into it. In fact, it specifically states. Now, my vote's a little older than everybody else's, I noticed. So one of these days I'll get another copy, but for now, this is the one. But it basically states, it's usually inadvisable to attempt to include reasons for a motion adoption within the motion itself. In other words, don't try to justify it. Once you make a motion, you have first right to speak on that motion because you made the motion. Therefore, that's when you put your reasons for doing it into there. That was a big one. That was the first one. That was the discussion of a motion when it's not, or staying on topic of a motion. Basically, last meeting we had a discussion of whether or not to put something on an agenda, and it turned into a discussion of the motion, or of the item that you wanted on the agenda. Had nothing to do with whether or not it was on the motion, on the agenda. Unfortunately, Robert, that falls to you. You gotta stop that. Say, this isn't acceptable. You need to stay on topic. The question is, do we put it on the agenda or don't we? Or do we pass this or don't we? That holds true for when the public is talking. If they come up and start attacking members of the commission, and it has nothing to do with what the agenda item is, have them sit down. Then my all-time favorite. Let me read this one out loud because this one was pretty good. Sorry about that. A member can condemn the nature or likely consequence of a proposed measure in strong terms, but they must avoid personalities and under no circumstances, can they attack or question the motives of another member. In other words, the minute the discussion started going on as whether or not there was a reason behind a motion, you got to stop them and say, I'm sorry, you can't question their reasoning, and you can't attack them personally. That's just unacceptable within the rules. If the rules get followed, that getting a counselor to give you all a group hug is going to be unnecessary. The rules are here to get business done, and that's what your job is, get business done. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie Webster.
I missed the last meeting, so I don't know. But so far, I count 3 claims of harassment by upper management and commissioners against 2 members of the public and a fellow commissioner who has spoken out against your shameless incompetence. I wonder who's next. And to that I say, bring it on, because several of us have gone up against worse than you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard Warren.
Mr. President, Commissioners, because of your bad attitude toward televising meetings, it's difficult for me to watch the whole meeting. I hate watching video on the computer, and particularly having to watch it live is a real problem. But that's just one part of the whole problem, which is that this commission, at least the majority of this commission, 3 out of the 5 commissioners, have the most severely bad attitude toward public participation that I've ever seen in my participation in government, which basically starts in 1980 going to prison commission meetings in LA. And in all that time, I have never seen a government agency that is as abusive to the public process as you are. You are not here to do your business. You are not here to do the Harbor District's business. You are here doing the public's business. The Brown Act says so in the first paragraph. I suggest you go read it. And in addition to that, I have never seen any board that is as toxic as this one is, that is as abusive to some of their own members as this board is. When I first got elected in 1997, we had a bitterly divided board for 2 years. But it was civil, it was polite. The minority members were not squashed into a corner. They were allowed to say what they wanted to say. We didn't run around looking for every possible picayune, arcane rule that we could dream up to try and nail them to the wall so they couldn't get their opinions across. And every single thing you've done to try and suppress Commissioner Brennan is ridiculous. And I don't know what this district is trying to cover up. There's 2 people here that are going to end up in jail. I just don't know why or when, but I guarantee it that we're going to get both of you in jail because you're protecting each other and you're covering something up, and we're going to find out what you're covering up.
Thank you. We are now at staff recognition.
Yes. Today I'd like to introduce 3 of the staff that are new to the district. And I'll ask them to stand as I read through this. Suzanne Walker is our new harbor worker at moving over to Torrey Point soon. Suzanne comes to us with an extensive background in shipwright work for over 15 years. She is certified in sailing and navigation. Suzanne has also attended the landing school in Maine for boat building. Additionally, she has her BA for Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine. And Suzanne replaces Ray Price, who left 2 months ago. Matt Hoff is our new deputy harbor master. He will be moving over to Oyster Point in the next couple weeks. We're doing cross-training between both sites, so that staff can go either way right now. Matt comes to us with a combined total of 5 years of marine experience, 4 years with the city of Morro Bay, and a year at Santa Cruz. His background training includes marine firefighting, coastal piloting and navigation, rescue boat operations, and the K-38 jet ski rescue training, PC-832 as well, and a firefighting certification from Idaho. Matt also has his BA from UCSB. And Matt replaces Rick Krebs, who retired 2 months ago. And lastly, we have Linda Azu. She is our new project manager, and she'll be working on both sides of the hill. And it's my pleasure to introduce her. Linda is a graduate of the University of California, San Diego, has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering. She has a project management experience with a background in sustainability and renewable energy engineering. Please welcome all 3 of the new staff.
Thank you. Welcome. We're very fortunate to have all 3 of you in the district. Is there any other staff recognition? Okay, thank you. That was really nice, and I really like the reading of the bios because it really helps us better get to know the staff. Thank you. I just got another speaker card in for the general speakers, so I'm gonna allow it this time, and then we'll continue on the order. Bob, I'm sorry, the last name?
Bob Cantillo.
Cantillo, Mr. Cantillo, would
I'd
you
like
like
to
to?
manage Robert's rules, and I will say that I like the part about being respectful of other people and agreeing to disagree and not making personal attacks. And I want to say that I think you guys do a really good job of listening to people on the several meetings I've come to. I've heard people say some pretty whacked out things and some downright mean things to you, and you listened politely and you didn't interrupt them. I heard a gentleman a little while ago say something about threats and intimidation from you people, and then say, you better fix it or else, or something, some such thing. And I didn't even hear a snicker at that point, but I have to say that it's nice that we live in a country where people can redress their grievances, and I think at the very least we're allowing people to do that, so you should be giving some credit for that. So there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Cantillo. Okay, we will continue now to consent calendar minutes of meeting November 6, 2013. Commissioners?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes of November 6th, 2013.
Okay, I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'm not.
Okay, so you would like to have it for discussion?
Can't hear.
Right, we could, yes, we'll pull the item. Okay, so I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second the purpose of discussion.
Okay, I hear a motion and a second. Okay, questions?
So I am not going to vote to approve the minutes, and we've talked about this extensively at past meetings, so I don't want to get too far into it tonight, so that we don't take up too much time, but essentially, because we are no longer videotaping and broadcasting our meetings, the minutes are important in order to reference what happened at the past meeting. I noticed that our last meeting minutes have not been included in our board packet tonight, so we're looking at minutes from 2 meetings ago. And the podcasts aren't effective because you can't tell who's speaking in the podcast. So for me personally, the minutes are really important that they be accurate. I have not found these minutes to be accurate. And I also noticed that we whittled down the public comment to just the name of the person who made public comment, but not whether they supported or opposed the agenda item. And I think it's important to include something about what their comment was, and that's not included. And there are other issues that I have in the minutes, but I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Opposed?
One opposed?
One abstention.
And, I'm sorry. So 3 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 opposed. Motion carries. Okay, we are now at commissioner requests. So, why don't we start over here on the right? Commissioner Brennan, commissioner's requests.
At 2 meetings ago, there was a request that was approved by the board to put the issue related to hoists at Johnson Pier on an upcoming agenda. And that was passed on November 6th. And it was not on the last agenda. It wasn't on this agenda. So I'd like to know when that item is going to be agendized. We were to get a report on the situation with hoists because there was, it was reported by the general manager that electrical was installed by one of the fish fires to provide electrical for a third hoist for that particular fish fire. And there was no additional information provided. So I'm wondering what the status of that agenda item is. That's a question for you here.
We can put it on the January agenda.
Okay, great. Also wanted to know at the last meeting, there was closed session, which was reported out on, and a decision to move forward with appraisal of the property in El Granada, potentially for a new location for the administrative staff. And I noticed that that wasn't on this agenda and wondered if there was an update or any information about when that appraisal was going to be done.
I was planning to do that in my manager's report.
Okay.
I can give it now if you wish.
Can you wait and keep it in the
It's in my report, yeah, it's in my report.
And then there has been a request by the board, which is about a year old now, I believe, for a few revisions to the Wi-Fi report, and I'm wondering what the status. I noticed that's not on the agenda.
I think I mentioned that the last time, and it wasn't, there was only a day, 2 days work between this agenda and the last one.
So when will the Wi-Fi report be on the agenda?
And I think there was a discussion last night, as soon as my manager lets me know it's high on the priority list, and we've not done so yet. So,
Peter, could you tell us when the Wi-Fi report will be back on the agenda?
Yeah, I think we can plan on it for the January agenda. Fortunately, with the cancellation of the winter season board meetings that gives staff a bit more room to finally deal with it.
So-
So I'll plan to put that on, I will put that on the January 15th agenda.
Thank you. I had a couple other things. I guess I don't want to ask these now or during those beforehand or something. There's a number of questions that have been asked repeatedly by some members of the public regarding the district's finances. And I'd like to follow up on some of those questions. When would you like me to ask those questions? Because I have a lot of questions about the audit, so this would be in addition to that.
Can we discuss those items? Trying to think where on the agenda we might discuss this. If it's regarding the audits, can we discuss it in item number 2? Is it-
I have a lot of questions about the audit, but these are in addition to the audit. So this is following up on, you know, we've been getting many emails from the public regarding questions about the district finances.
Okay.
So these are following up on some of those questions. I could fit that in with the audit.
I'm just trying to think of where in the finance area it can fit, because these are finance-related
They are,
questions, so.
yeah, and
I'm
they're not
thinking-
related to bills and claims.
Well, how about under staff reports number 9, Director of Finance? You could ask them directly about Director of
Okay,
Finance. How's
that sounds good.
I think that's a really good fit.
And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Carabano? No. Okay. And I have one commissioner request. I believe that I made the request at the previous meeting or the meeting before regarding an informational item on the whole process of liens and evictions and how that works. So can I have a report at some point on that? Just an informational report.
Certainly, January.
Perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to get it on the calendar.
At one of our meetings, you had asked to get a report on alcohol consumption by staff. Did that ever get followed up on?
That was a while ago, yeah. It was, let me try to remember the question. It was something about, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Do we have a policy on drinking? And it sounds kind of vague, but just, you know, for example, drinking during the lunch hour, drinking, you know, in general, you know, after hours.
You want an answer now?
Events? Or
You don't, I mean, if you'd like
You
to.
want a report? Is that what you're asking?
Whatever's more convenient. I don't want to get a whole report. Maybe you just answer it at the next meeting. You just maybe verbally.
I'll do it verbally.
Yeah, I don't want to add, you know, have to create a report. Okay, that was my only commissioner's request. Commissioner Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have just one request for information. I didn't interrupt previous speakers, but I'm still confused. You've moved commissioner requests up to this part of the agenda, which is your prerogative, I believe, in my opinion. And it says the Board of Harbor Commissioners may make public requests, comma, requests may be made to place items on future agendas. But then when we look back later, commissioner statements and comments, it seems to me that it's still confusing, and that if you, in your wisdom, would take out the first sentence and remove make public requests and put that back where it's supposed to be, then we could deal with just motions for things on the agenda, which I thought was the purpose.
Thank you.
And I didn't want to interrupt, so I didn't say anything.
I don't
but
understand that suggestion. Could you rephrase it?
I don't know if I can rephrase it, but I'll explain it to you again. It seems to me there's two issues here on this particular agenda item. One is an individual up here, one of us, may make public requests, whatever that means. And the second part of that says requests may be made to place items on the agenda. Traditionally, this item is supposed to be just to place items on the agenda, not to make reports or to ask things from staff. The purpose of that would be coming later when it says commissioner statements and comments.
But that sounds like your opinion. I didn't.
Oh, I'm only one person, of course, that's my opinion.
Okay.
But if you wish, I'll make a motion then that that be changed, Mr. President. If you
Would this
decide
be
you
the
don't
time
want
to make that motion?
Yes, it would. It says here, request may be made to place fewer items on the agenda.
It actually would, and you know what, actually, that was confusing to me too. And I think it's because it's just been titled Commissioner's Request. It's really agenda setting, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of what this was going to be for, is for placing things on agenda and having a vote on things to be on the agenda. Or am I incorrect?
Well, in the past, we had one item, and you decided to split it into two. The item was commissioner's requests and commissioner statements. So you decided to split commissioner requests and commissioner statements to two different times of the meeting, which seemed reasonable to try to move the meeting along. But we had to do, remember, we had to do the commissioner requests at the beginning of the meeting because the board voted to put the time limit on meetings, and so then we weren't getting to an opportunity to make commissioner requests. And since the board had also voted to not allow commissioners to get things put on the agenda without first making a request of the board and getting majority vote, to have the item placed on a future agenda, since there was all that rigmarole added in, then we ended up needing to move it to the beginning of the meeting versus the end of the meeting. So it was always requests and statements. It was not agenda items and statements. The reason it became agenda items, I think, in Commissioner Tucker's mind is because of his wanting to have this delay in commissioners' ability to put agenda items on the agenda.
We're not, we can't make assumptions of what other people are
Well,
thinking. So I'm just going to say that I think that we're basically saying the same thing here. A request and wanting to put something on the agenda are the same thing.
No,
I think that's what we're trying to say.
I disagree, because sometimes you like to make a request to staff, like you just did that. You just did that a few minutes ago.
Right, but wasn't that in the vein of a previous request to put something on the agenda? It was a reminder, similar to the informational item that I had asked for, the eviction and liens. That was to place something on the agenda.
But I
to
think,
ask staff.
if I'm understanding Commissioner Tucker, what he's saying is he doesn't want those requests being made. He just wants formal requests for agenda items. And what we did today was I asked for where's the Wi-Fi report that was a past request for an agenda item that was agendized and then was supposed to be re-agendized for a future meeting but never was. And so I'm following up on that. You're following up on stuff, but that's different than actually asking for a new agenda item. So see how that's different?
I see what you're
And they're
saying.
both requests.
And I would say that requesting of information and following up on other things should best be served to come later in the agenda where it says commissioner requests and statements.
Well, I
So if we keep them
disagree.
separate, it would be much easier and clearer for us to understand. Then I'll ask for a point of information. Is it your opinion to change that, or would you rather have it formally done?
I'm hearing both what you're saying, and I'm agreeing with both of them because these are two different things. The first piece, the reason why we did Commissioner Brennan is correct. We put it in the beginning because we wanted to make sure that we were able to place things on the agenda in the beginning. And then the commissioner's statements are exactly, comments. It could be wishing, the public happy holidays, that type of thing. So those are different to me. A commissioner's statement and then agenda setting are two different things, and we did separate them out. So that's kind of in my mind what the difference between a statement is and then this section, which is requests and agenda setting. So, do we have to vote on that? I'm sorry, do we have to vote on that?
If it makes it easier, let me, Mr. President, with your indulgence,
Yes.
then I would move that the agenda item referred to as commissioner requests be renamed as agenda setting, and then the paragraph below state that the Board of Harbor Commissioners may make requests to have future items placed on the agenda. I would so move.
So I'm not understanding that. You're suggesting.
May I see if I get a second first? Okay, I heard that there's a motion, so is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, I hear a motion and a second. Okay, discussion, questions. Commissioner Brennan, you had a question?
I didn't even follow what Commissioner Tucker said, so I need him to restate it so I understand what he just said.
Could you state your motion, please?
I move that the agenda item known as commissioner requests be renamed agenda setting, and that the paragraph below be called, "The Board of Harbor Commissioners may make requests to have future items placed on agendas."
Okay, so that's not what I understood Commissioner, or President Bernardo to just say, which was that what we were doing during this agenda item was making requests that were related to agenda items, as well as making formal requests for a future agenda item, that we were doing both of those things during this time, and statements at the end of the meeting would be specifically if somebody wanted to make some sort of grand proclamation or wish somebody a happy birthday or, happy holidays, whatever. So I think that by restating it the way that you have, it doesn't allow for a commissioner to to ask any questions about agenda items that they may have asked for previously that never got put on an agenda, or to follow up on reports that were supposed to be provided after an agenda item as a follow-up that the board requested, that sort of thing.
That's exactly correct, and it suggests that those items that you say follow-up would be best served by being placed later in the agenda under Commissioner statements and comments. And this be specifically, as the motion points out, just for items to be made for the agenda.
And Commissioner Tucker, so not informational requests?
Not informational requests.
Informational would be pushed,
Back to the Commission statements and comments.
okay, I see.
So we might not be able to ask those things because of the time limit.
The chair could always move up the time limit or change the agenda items.
Okay, but there's a motion and a second.
We're having discussion on the motion. I'd like to make a comment on it.
Sure, after Commissioner Paravano.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Paravano.
So I can probably extend this a little bit more to into the confusion sphere.
Okay, why not?
This is a motion for placing this item on a future agenda. We're not going to vote on whether this format gets changed tonight. We're voting on placing this motion for on the next.
That's my understanding.
That's our
Okay.
rule.
That's our understanding.
Okay.
And Commissioner Holzinger.
I think Commissioner Paravano said it well. The purpose of this here is to get this issue up for vote on the next agenda. And to be discussing the pros and cons is simply not necessary or appropriate at this time.
Understood. Okay, so I hear a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Piovano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye, and this will be placed for a vote in the, and discussion in the next agenda. It will be placed on the next agenda. The change, the proposed change. Okay. We are now that's right, thank you. We are moving item 4 up. So let me see, first of all, with regards to speaker cards, because what we're going to do is we're going to have the report, then we're going to have the speakers, and then we're going to have the commissioners. So item 4, who is introducing item 4? Okay, our council.
And good
Ms.
evening.
Savory?
Good evening. What we have in front of you this evening is a request for authorization to retain the services of 2 separate outside investigators to look into 3 separate complaints that the district has received. And Arlen Chalia from Beaver Cassidy is advising you on this matter. He's here this evening and can answer any questions on the contracts. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Kachalia.
Good evening. Ms. Savory has presented the contract, so I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
And we don't have any speaker cards for this particular item.
Any questions?
So, Commissioner Tucker.
To either of you, I suspect our council, is there a need for any of us to recuse ourselves that is directly involved in this?
I don't believe so at this point.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have some questions.
Commissioner Brennan?
I seem to remember, did we already vote to approve the contract with LCW? Because I know tonight we're being asked to approve contracts with two other attorneys, Amy Oppenheimer and who's the other one? Karen Kramer. Kramer Workplace Investigations. Did we also previously approve a contract with LCW?
The district has been in contract with LCW for
Many years.
decades, and to provide employment-related counseling and services to the district.
Could we be provided with that contract? Because that way we'd be seeing the full menagerie of contracts related to harassment complaints.
Sure, I don't have that this evening with me, but sure, we can provide that to you. Yes, they have been your employment law attorneys for many years.
Well, I'm kind of new to the board, so I didn't know that. So could you email that to us?
I will work with Peter to get that contract, yes.
Okay, do you think we could have that by next week?
I don't know if we'll get you to this pan.
Okay. I was wondering if we could get an update on costs to date. Would you be able to provide us with that information?
Cost as to what?
Cost for the various work that's been done.
Mr. President,
There are
I raise a point of order.
Yes.
The issue here is the approval of the recommendation for these two hires, and the inquiry now is going far afield of that.
Okay,
I think that's a question. Why can't I?
I think that's a valid question.
I mean, we should know the cost for the board.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. There are no costs. We are just asking for authorization seating to enter into these contracts.
Okay, so today there's no cost, there's no
These
invoicing.
individuals have not been retained. That is the purpose of this item, is to ask whether the board wishes to retain these individuals or not.
And just to clarify, I understand that, or I think I understand this correctly, there's one overarching investigating law firm, which is LCW, and then there are two other attorneys that are working underneath LCW. Is that how this is set up? And they report to you guys, or how does that work?
LCW is not providing any investigative services. LCW is the district's employment law attorneys. It is their recommendation that two outside investigators be retained to investigate complaints, pending complaints.
So okay, I guess why I'm confused is I was interviewed for about 4.5 hours by LCW, and now I'm supposed to be interviewed again by Amy Oppenheimer, and I'm wondering why I'm being interviewed by the two different law firms instead of just one law firm, and if there's a good reason for that, I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I'd just like to better understand the process.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, if I could just interrupt here. Ms. Savory, I think this is a really good opportunity for all of us, including the members of the public, to understand how this works in terms of, if there is pending lawsuit or litigation, how the whole subcontracting works, how an investigator may be hired, for certain duties, things like that. Can you kind of just lay the landscape of how that works?
Sure. When complaints are received, the law in California requires that the employer determine the nature of the complaint. Once the nature of the complaint has been determined, then there needs to be an investigation of the allegations in that complaint, because a complaint is when received, a statement from someone's opinion about something. The law then requires that an investigation be conducted to determine whether or not that complaint is a valid complaint or not. So at this point, all we have done is determine the nature of the complaints. That triggers now the need to move to the second phase, which is to investigate those complaints. So it just so happens that these investigators that Ms. Chalia is recommending are attorneys. They will not be acting as attorneys, they will be acting as investigators.
Thank you.
So does that mean, just so I understand, since I was interviewed by LCW and now I'm going to be interviewed again by the investigator, by one of the investigators, does that mean that each person who filed a complaint, since there are 3 complaints now, will be interviewed by LCW and then re-interviewed by a secondary investigator? Is that how the process works?
I will defer slightly to Mrs. Chalia on this one, but it's my understanding that on each of these complaints, there was a determination made by Mrs. Chalia about the nature of the complaint, and now they will be referred to the investigators to investigate.
Right. 2 of the 3 complaints that we received were in written form, so there was no need for me to investigate or to interview the complainant for the nature of their allegations.
That helps explain. And so, is it set up so that there's a separate investigator for each person who has a complaint? Because if that were the case, why wouldn't there be 3 different investigators?
In this situation, I determined it would be the best course of action to have one investigator serve as the investigator for 2 of the 3 complaints. It was what I determined to be the most efficient manner.
Okay, and counselors, please, let's be very careful. I know we're dealing with sensitive items here. I mean, these are personnel issues and very confidential in nature. So I just want to caution everyone. I know we're kind of having this discussion now. I know that a lot of this does happen in confidential environments. So I just want to caution everyone to just make sure we're not violating some sort of, attorney-client privilege here.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion.
I have one more question.
Okay, Commissioner Bryant.
So I know I made my complaint on August 7th, and the secondary, other 2 complaints came in mid-October, but I noticed that wasn't mentioned in this paperwork that we got from you guys. I don't think it was anyway. Just the dates.
I haven't referred to any dates in these investigations, in these contracts. I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, are those dates not correct?
There's no dates in here.
Oh, okay. I thought I read, I must have read the dates in that other letter you sent. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bryant.
I would make a motion that the Board President, Robert Bernardo, be authorized to execute contracts for both Karen Kramer and Amy Oppenheimer.
Okay, I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I hear a second. I hear a motion and a second. Any other? Okay, roll call, please, since we're dealing with finances and money.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Pirovano? Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. All opposed? None. So motion
Thank you.
passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we are back to item number 2, and I know I have some speaker cards here. I have 2 speaker cards, so we're gonna have a report, then we're going to have the public speakers, and then we're going to have the commissioner's questions. So, who is going to give this report?
For the financial. We have Joe Arch and Brett here, our auditors.
Would you like to introduce them and kind of explain why they're here and who they are, and give us some background?
Joe Arch is here again for the 2nd year. He is here to answer questions that the commission or managers might have. They spent some time in the field and auditing our books, and they have a report for you.
Okay, and just kind of background, I mean, this is an annual thing, and this is a
annual
standard
report.
practice? Or
Yes,
what
we're
do you-
required to have an annual audit.
Okay, we're required to, okay.
Yes, every year,
Okay,
and have so.
okay. Thank you. So, and I think Mr. Arch may go a little bit into that, and those
Right.
requirements, those mandates, so, please.
Okay, thank you. So the annual audit is required by the California Government Code, and essentially, this is a lot earlier than the first year, because the first year was the infrastructure evaluation that delayed the report last year. So this is actually more of a regular type of timing to have the financial statements and audit report issues. Typically by the end of the calendar year, we want to have the report before you to look at and to review. So as far as the audit goes, we look at a sample of transactions and different systems. We look at internal control procedures. We look at various account balances based upon what we determine is something that would be significant to the financial statements when we look at them in their entirety. So what we do, and it's kind of outlined in our report, our auditor's report, which is at the beginning of the report before you, it kind of identifies what management's responsibility is, what our responsibility is. It's a little bit more detailed than the report that was given to you in the prior year. So this is kind of important in terms of where the division or line of responsibility is for these financial statements. And they're essentially kind of spelled out that they're your financial statements. So we just, as an independent third party, we audit them and determine if they are materially correct. And that's
I'm sorry, if I could interrupt you, Mr. Arch. What did you just say? If they are
materially
okay, and can you please define that? What does that mean?
So materiality is a level of determination that's based on our judgment, based on what the balances are in the financial statement. And what that is it's what would sway someone to think that financial condition was either improving or deteriorating, essentially change their mind as to the way they look at the numbers. And so we established that, and of course don't tell anybody about it, in order to do our testing and to identify whether or not we believe that the balances presented in the financial statements are at a level that we believe is correct, to a point. So it's not, you can never be completely sure that a number is the number because some of the things are estimated. So yeah, if you and take an account like depreciation, which is an estimate of the wear and tear on your assets, that, given a certain number may sway one way or the other. So that's why you had an infrastructure valuation, because there was a significant balance that needed to be presented on the financial statements in order for you to present all of your capital assets on the books. So that's kind of, in general terms, I'm trying to stay away from more accounting terms as to how to present it. But so that's kind of how we look at things too. Other than that, I'm basically here to answer questions. With that.
We might ask you to come back up again, but right now what I'd like to do is I'd like to take the 2 public comments right now. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I'm sure we'll have some. I have Mr. Ullman and Ms. Webster.
Good evening. I'm having a hard time understanding how we can pass it on. I know that there's a whole bunch of auto deposits and checks that were credited to the accounts. And this is why it's difficult to know who owes us what. And so the bank balances will show one thing, and the balances in the accounting program should show something different. Assuming that what I'm saying is correct, that deposits were credited, people's balances in the accounting program, but the deposits didn't get made to the bank. So right there, I believe there should be two check reconciliation. You should quite see that there's a divergence between the bank balances, the banks telling me what your accounting code is telling me. I would wonder if, is it normal to carry negative balances on the accounts receivable report? Like tens and tens of thousands of dollars in negative balances. We originally were told that those negative balances on accounts receivable reports were due to deposits that had not been refunded. But recently I was told that the really large ones, the negative $7,000, the negative $10,000 ones, represent prepayments. Apparently you have people that will prepay. Is carrying that on accounts receivable the proper thing to do? Shouldn't that be in a separate account where deposits are held and prepayments are held, so it's not commingled with money that you're actually using for operating expenses? I'd like to hear that addressed. And the third thing that was asserted to me the other day is that we're not an enterprise district. And then the assertion was correct to say is we've never been run like an enterprise district. And I know there are very specific accounting rules for enterprise districts. And so, again, since we haven't been running like an enterprise district for quite some time, and we are required to run like an enterprise district, or at least if the assertions that I've been told are true, how can we pass it on? How can we even come close? So I'd like to hear those questions asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Ms. Leslie Webster.
Commissioners, I'm surprised that the recent audit did not include a review of the district's accounting procedures. Given the missing check debacle and complaints by tenants concerning accounting and billing issues, it seems prudent and wise to recommend an independent accounting procedure audit.
Thank you. Okay. So now we are at Commissioner's questions. Mr. Tucker.
If I may, just a couple of questions. Did you find that our bank statements were reconciled current?
Yeah, they were current.
That's an important factor. I guess in your lingo, you would say that we are practicing generally acceptable accounting procedures?
Well, yeah, the audit actually indicates that,
I know, but many of the public have not had the opportunity to read your audit as we have. Let me ask you, did you find any improprieties or needs to make suggestions to us to change things?
they would have appeared in the secondary communications letter.
That's correct, and I didn't see that. Does that mean you have none for us?
That's correct.
So then I must assume by that we're doing things correctly. It may or may not come up, but there was a problem that we experienced with one of our employees that didn't deposit checks immediately when they were supposed to be deposited. And without getting into too much detail, did you find fault with that? Are you recommending anything to eliminate that? Is there a need for us to be concerned?
No, and again, that would have appeared in the communications letter. That we basically what happened was district personnel found it, corrected it. They notified us about it when we came out for our field work, and we reviewed the receiving process to determine if. So from an audit standpoint, we look to see if we believe that that particular situation is considered isolated. So it's an isolated incident. And that's basically what we determined through our own procedures to determine if it was pervasive throughout the entire district or just isolated. And we made the determination that it was isolated to a personnel issue.
Yeah, and we rotate the positions here, as you might understand. And I'm treasurer this year. And when this came out and we made it public, and it got plenty of air, in my opinion, I met with staff to see if there was something we could do to change that. And for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an employee, it's a lower level employee. They're more of a receptionist that takes in a couple of tenants' monies.
Right.
So I'm glad to hear that you say there's nothing that you would do. I just wanted to quote one sentence from page 37 of 38 pages. On the bottom, it says, "During our audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we consider to be material weaknesses. However, material weaknesses may exist from time to time." And I certainly want to thank you. It's a very illuminating report and very thorough. This is your second year with us. Is there 1 year left on your contract?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I have a question. Any other questions?
I have questions, but go ahead because I'm not quite ready.
Okay. My simple question is this: are we in your? I mean, and I basically heard it, but I want to ask this question: are we in full compliance with government auditing standards, and are we in full compliance with the law?
Well, we're not attorneys, so we can't speak to that side of it, but as far as the accounting principles, our opinion states that financials are presented are generally accepted accounting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
And if you wanted me to answer the comments that were made about the speaker comments.
Actually, that'd be great because it'll give an opportunity for. Could you please address those? One was enterprise district, and then the other question.
So essentially, the way the district is formed is through California code, and the way you operate functionally from an accounting standpoint is based upon certain criteria, and you get most of your funding through user fees. So that's what, from an accounting standpoint, that's why you operate as an enterprise operation. It's actually, it would be different if you operated as a governmental operation. The presentation would be different. And the code that you were formed under, I believe is the Harvard Code, primarily indicates that you're an enterprise operation. So,
May I add one thing to that? The only thing that differentiates us from an enterprise zone or enterprise capacity is the fact that we receive property tax. If we did not receive 4.3 last year, 5.1 this coming year, $1 million in property tax, then we would be a true enterprise function.
well, yeah, I mean, the property tax is a different issue.
So that's what makes us a quasi-enterprise. That's what the confusing part is.
No, because, water districts get property tax, sewer districts get property tax.
But they're not formed by the state of California through Harbor Navigations.
Yeah, but they're formed through the water code. So it's, there's similarities between special districts that make them more enterprise-like. So if you get a predominant amount of your revenue from user fees, you're an enterprise operation, regardless of whether or not you get property tax.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's okay.
Thank you.
Well, that was helpful because I kept hearing mixed things about whether or not we were an enterprise district, and now I can clearly tell people we are an enterprise district. So thank you for explaining that.
Mm-hmm. And there is a difference between, Commissioner Pepper indicated, enterprise zones. Enterprise zones are more of a tax terminology. So that's governed by the federal government, and that bears no relationship to the district. So I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so we're an enterprise district. Thank you. So I had some questions. Let's see here. The first one relates, I guess, sort of relates back to the issue with the missing checks. I just wondered who was reconciling the checking accounts when the previous finance director was with the district, because that's when, the checks started becoming missing back in early 2012. So who was responsible for doing the reconciliation at that point?
Ms. Harris, were you going to answer that
I was just
question?
going to say the checks were not missing. That's
They were found.
Confusing.
They were found.
Yeah. Well, but they were missing for like a year. So that's what I meant. So who was responsible for reconciling the checks that were not reconciled? Whose job was that? Like, what job title does that?
It was, I think the checks you're talking about starting in 2012 were $22 parking checks.
There were parking checks and there were slip checks. There was a whole.
No. If you look at the organizational report that she pulled together.
I'm just talking about all the checks that were
Okay.
missing, the whole batch.
Break, he's going to be gone.
Yes. Should we take a break until Commissioner Tucker comes back?
We can all,
Okay.
Could we just answer that one question?
I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting you, Commissioner Brennan. Let's answer this one question and then we'll go to break.
So
The question is,
what job title is responsible for reconciling the checks that come in to the various offices? Voice your
The
point,
accounting
Maureen.
technicians receive the checks.
Okay, and then who reconciles the checks?
The checks get deposited by the accounting technician.
Okay.
And then the accountant, which is me, does the bank reconciliation.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So we're going to take a break?
are we taking a break, Commissioners? Or not? Okay, not yet. Commissioner Brennan, please continue.
Okay.
And are these questions for him or questions for me?
I have questions for the auditor. First question. Did you follow state of California controller guidelines for accounting for harbor and port districts? This is sort of a two-part question. Did you verify that the accounting practices were in accord with those guidelines?
There are no state controller harbor district guidelines. What you're probably referring to is the state controller's minimum requirements for special districts, which is part of our audit. So I guess to answer your question shortly, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to call that the guidelines for special districts.
Yeah, it's
more
guidelines for
accurate.
special districts.
Okay, and then, thank you for that. Did you sample accounts receivable and customer deposits to determine the statistical accuracy of the accounts?
Statistical, what do you mean by statistical?
Just accuracy. Did you check them for accuracy? Did you do a sampling of accounts receivable and customer deposits?
Yes.
And why are customer deposits included in the enterprise section of the statements and not the restricted according to the state controller's specific guidelines regarding these accounts?
I didn't know there were any requirements to have deposits restricted because they're not.
Can you speak up?
They said they're not, I don't believe there are any requirements that indicate that you have to report them as restricted. Deposits are liabilities of the district. It's not unusual to have your deposits with your accounts receivable account because that's where you include the customer record. So if you have a customer record that has a billing associated with it, to more easily apply that deposit when somebody leaves or terminates a contract or something like that, it's easier to include it with along with the receipt.
So no.
I wouldn't, well, I can't say no because I don't believe there's a requirement to have it restricted.
So no requirement is your opinion? Okay. Thank you. Are you aware of the missing checks? We already determined that you are. When the public inquired into these and asked for the accounts receivable listing, they noticed that there were negative balances. They inquired about these and were told that this was due to customer deposits indicating that the deposits were not kept in separate liabilities liability accounts. What is the situation here? Are they kept in separate accounts?
Yeah, they are. They're in the deposit payable.
Deposit account, a separate general ledger account shows the amount of deposits.
Yeah. So they're not.
They're not commingled.
They're not commingled. It's, the customer record may include both, but that billing amount is shown in accounts receivable and the deposit is shown as the deposit payable. So they're in two separate places in the plan.
Okay, so they are in two separate accounts.
Yeah, there is an account called, I'm referring to page 12 in the audit report, customer deposit.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a note, page 12. The state controller's guidelines call for the restricted funds to be accounted for in separate restricted assets section of the balance sheet. Are the funds held for debt service the only restricted funds? If so, how are they held? By what investments, et cetera? And I'm going to keep going with this, just, I'm almost done. Customer deposits, it would appear should be there, but it doesn't look like they are. What about grant funds? Does the district have or hold any grant funds with restrictions, or are the grants shown in other parts of the audit unrestricted?
Okay, so the first part of the question is with regard to district bond funds, which typically are held as restricted cash and investments specifically for bond issues. That is, of course, if the bond issue has a cash with fiscal agent amount. And those balances, when it comes to debt, are separated and are shown as restricted cash and investments within, again, on page 12. The customer deposits are not required to be separated out in terms of the cash amount. They're only to be recorded as a liability, which again, they are that same page. As far as the second part of your question, I can't recall what.
About the grants?
About the grants. It depends, first of all, what the source of the grant is. Any revenue for grants, if you have any, are shown on page 13 under the caption capital grant. Any grants would appear in this section called non-operating revenues and expenses in the financial statements. And not only are they accounted for separately in the financials, but the general ledger with the district would have it recorded as notes. So you could identify what the grant is, and if it had any specific restrictions. Typically grants are, when they're capital grants, are for a specific purpose in which you might have a capital expenditure associated with it and are used to construct an asset or to use on a project. And so those items, the actual asset item, would be owned by the district and reported in the capital asset section.
Thank you. Can you prepare separate balance sheet statements for restricted funds? Can you prepare separate sources and uses statements for enterprise and restricted funds according to state guidelines?
Okay, again, I don't think there are any state requirements. The sources and uses, again, are specifically used for bonding or debt. types of instruments. Usually as part of an official statement or a funding of debt, the underwriter or the financial advisor preparing those statements would include where you can get the money to pay for the project, and that's what a source of use statement is. It doesn't really belong in a set of financial statements. Typically, those official statements include the audited financial statements as support for the sources of use statement. They're your financial statements. If you wanted informational types of reporting in this report, then they would be presented as separate schedules in the back.
So that could be provided?
Well, I don't know, I don't see a need for it because the only purpose of a sources and uses statement is if you were going to issue debt. And in that case, a more appropriate statement to go on here would be what's called debt capacity. So basically your ability to cover the debt payment. And that certainly is something that could be included in this report.
What would we call that again?
It's called debt capacity, and a schedule of debt.
I'm sorry, say that again. Debt.
Schedule of debt capacity.
Can I just ask a kind of piggyback question on this? Is that related to like a debt service coverage ratio?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
How hard? I'm sorry.
I just, because your terms are different, and I know that where I work in a government agency, we have similar terminology, and that's what we call it, debt service coverage ratio.
Yeah.
There's a certain number that you want to make sure that you're not.
Yeah, and
pay your debts.
usually that calculation is something that we would do anyway. As part of to make sure that you have the money covered. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
But you're saying usually you would do that, but
Yeah.
have you done that?
Yeah, we do it every year because typically that's part of the covenants within the debt issue. That you have a certain coverage.
So you could add though more information.
We could add that schedule, and it wouldn't be any,
Wouldn't be a big deal.
no big deal.
Could we get that included?
Yeah, you can put it together.
Just email it or something?
Now, I mean, we have to attend the statement, so.
I see. Okay, next question, thank you. Did and can you verify that the 6/30/13 investment report compiled, matches with the Commission's policy on reporting investments, and does it conform to the audit 6/30/13 balance sheets, the audited balance sheets?
Well, if you're talking about the investment report, a lot of times is prepared prior to our doing our audit. So the balances could change from that report to the audited balance, given the timing of when that report is required to be presented to the board and when our audit was presented. So potentially, there could be differences. But so I wouldn't say categorically to match, but I would, we look at the total based upon information that we do confirmations to verify the balances that are presented in this general ledger. So we can say that they match. These financial statements match what's in the general ledger. Anything other than that presented to the board, I
understand. Okay. You mentioned some of the investment policies in your notes. Is the district in compliance with all of its adopted policies? Does the investment report furnished to the board comply with policy 4.4.1, are signed certification forms current?
Certification. What's the certification form?
Related to the policy. And you could get back to me on this question if you don't know that policy.
I'm not familiar with the certification form for investments.
Okay, let's keep moving. Thank you.
But, so just what I think you might be asking is whether or not your investments conform to, you know, basically state guidelines and, you know, the views. And just kind of as an aside, you don't really have any investments, so you're not as exposed to like market changes and those types of things. You know, given that the interest rate is arbitrarily low, I think about the only thing that you have is a considerably low amount of interest income and investment. But you know that doesn't mean that you have any investments that would cause you to be at risk.
So policy 4.7.1 calls for an annual inventory to be completed by 6/30. Did you examine this report and reconcile it to the financial statements?
Annual inventory of the investments.
I'm not looking at the policy right now. I just looked it up earlier.
So, I mean, you don't have any physical securities or investments that you could inventory. So there's no real need for that.
In light of the missing check event which occurred during the period that you were conducting your audit, did you examine the policies, procedures, and controls for handling your receipts?
Yes.
And did you make recommendations on any improvements that might be made so that that sort of problem wouldn't happen again?
I mean, we discussed procedures, but we didn't have any specific recommendations that weren't already going to be done by district staff. And if we had, they would have appeared in the communications letter.
Did you verify that the bank reconciliations were performed in a timely manner according to the commission adopted policy 4.6.1? The policy calls for, in quotes, on a regular basis, at least bi-monthly, the finance committee of the Board of Harbor Commissioners will review all bank account reconciliation information. Given there is not a finance committee currently, and I don't recall there ever being a finance committee, so it must have been a long time ago when there actually was one, then the whole board should be reviewing. But during my tenure, I have not seen a reconciliation.
Okay. So essentially the reconciliation is what caused it. And so they were performed in a timely manner. And, you know, essentially I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the reconciliations were reviewed by the treasurer. So I believe the treasurer is acting in the purview of the finance committee.
Well, it seems that that's not in sync with the policy, but that's a topic I can take up later. So when you say that the missing checks were caught by the reconciliation in a timely manner, how is it that there were missing checks that were missing for like a year? How come they weren't caught sooner?
Well, I can't speak to that because one of the things with the types of checks that they were is incidental, like fines and those types of things. That isn't what got caught. What got caught was the receivable. So it wasn't it wasn't possible to find that. It just became what was found after it was investigated, after the receivable issue was determined.
So given recent staff changes, are the bank's signature cards and supporting resolutions current? Okay,
I
just
believe
wanted
they
to
are.
double check. Has the general manager received any reimbursements or made credit card charges that should be submitted as an expense report to submit it to the board for approval according to the commission's policy?
I don't know that.
I think everything that Peter charges or any expense he has goes through the president. So we usually bring it, or Emily would bring, like, say, his Cal card or something like that to the president to review.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just the president reviews it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the district complying with Chapter 36?
And he reviews it upon payment.
Okay. Is the district complying with Chapter 36 of the California Government Code, Section 82048.5, Policy 4.2.3? Summary, did you, the auditor, evaluate the compliance with commission-adopted policies?
Well, commission, yeah, I mean, we look at the policies and how they affect the goals and the transactions that occur.
So you
we
have-
look- We look at the policies in relation to the financial policies that relate to the general ledger and the numbers that are recorded in the
Almost done, you guys. Since this is the only financial information that the board has received since the last audit, it would have been useful to have the following information: a statement of the actual results versus the board-adopted budget for 2012-13, a statement of the budgeted versus actual to date of each capital project, and a statement of future fund requirements. That's just a comment.
Okay, did you want me to respond to that?
If you'd like to.
So budgetary information for an enterprise district is used primarily as a monitoring device to allow you to essentially stay within the means. It's not a required statement to be recorded in the financial statements. What I might suggest is that if you want budget to actual type information, that information will be presented as part of your budget process, and possibly even have staff prepare what's called a mid-year review, or some other financial report that helps you identify, for your budgeting cycle, whether or not, the projects are on target, the accounts are within budget, and it would help you with your budget process for the next year as well.
So,
Sometimes, we'll do separate ends. We should get all our numbers in by January, so the first meeting in February, we would have a good year. Budget's actual.
early February.
First meeting in February, for sure.
And then I'm wondering if, since we haven't talked about the audit in South San Francisco, and I didn't know this was going to be on the agenda, so I didn't have really much time to prepare, if we could have this item come back to a meeting in South San Francisco so that the people on the other side of the hill have an opportunity to ask questions or understand what the budget is and take a look at it with the board.
I'm sorry, so just for clarification, you'd like to place on an agenda a repeat of this presentation?
Well, I don't know if we need to have the auditor come back, but I think it would be good to have this come back to the agenda in case there's any additional questions that come up between now and then that maybe we can get more information on. And so that we're not, we're a countywide district, and it's really hard for people on the other side of the hill to get to meetings over here and vice versa. So I'm wondering if we could have the audit in both locations.
Mr. President, I would rise in opposition to that idea.
I just don't understand why we would repeat this item. I mean, we've never really done that before on any item, have we?
Well, we do with the budget. We've had, for the budget.
Preparation of the budget is different from this type of audit.
Well,
This is-
I'm not feeling like I have all my ducks in a row as far as all my questions go. So I think.
Okay, I understand that Commissioner Brennan, you did ask quite a few questions.
I did.
It's not like, I mean, you could certainly ask more questions. And I'm sure that,
One more question.
Okay.
What did the audit cost?
It was 20, I want to say, we voted on that, I want to say between 23 and, it was, we didn't have a single audit.
Yeah, you didn't have a
We didn't have a
single
single audit, so
So
less than
It was
23.
now 17 to 20.
Yeah, I missed the 5, you're right.
And that's because the second year is easier to do than the first year.
Yeah.
And that's why the other committee sets it up that way.
Right.
Can't wait for the third year.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I just have,
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Olson.
well, first of all, thank you very much for your service to the district. I understand that you found no accounting irregularities, and you gave us a clean bill of health. My question to you is a little more subjective in terms of the response that might be elicited. Given our level of annual budget, about $9 million a year, do you have any recommendations that aren't in your report that we might change our process somewhat to be more consistent with the amount of our annual revenues and expenditures?
I think that in terms of just suggestions, and that's, you're asking more of an operational type of question than an audit question, but having been on both sides of the desk, so to speak, that typically, when you're operating a district your size, the only thing that is cautionary is based upon what your level of revenue is and how volatile it is. So you want, and the district appears to have essentially enough cash flow to support its operations and to contribute money to its fund balance every year. But a lot of times you don't want to bite off more than you can chew given the economic environment. And that's what I mean by that is essentially not changing the pattern to a point where you just start spending money because the economy is improving. You want to continue to be prudent, and I believe, from what I just mentioned, that's, it's a prudent thing to have contributions to your fund balance every year. But don't change from a district that is more conservative financially to one that spends more. Because essentially that would put you in a more, financially speaking, it would cause the financial situation to deteriorate.
Mr. President, just one thought on that. I'm sure you noticed that we have a mandated restricted fund, that being the Department of Building and Waterways, which is now part of the ratio 1.4, which is our 1.4 million, which is our final payment. We also have self-imposed restrictions, where we sold property, we put that in restricted funds for our own benefit. And when we spend money on capital projects at the beginning of the year, we anticipate, and sometimes they get rather large, $1.5, $2.5 million. And when we do our financial adjustments, actual to budget, we can cut back on those capital projects. And that's kind of our saving grace, if you will. So we've never gone overboard and found ourselves not saving money for a rainy day.
Right.
You know, I'm sure you're impressed with the $19.9 million debt we had, which is now $7.1 million. And that's in trying economic times. This organization has done one hell of a job these past years.
So just to confirm, if I can understand what you're saying, you're simply saying that we should not make any significant or major changes in how we're conducting our finances and how we're spending the money we are receiving. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, I'm sorry. Was your question?
Probably there's anything else left to ask.
Okay, yes.
I would move to accept the audited fiscal year 2012-2013 financial statements and recommendations to management.
Thank you. I hear a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay, I hear a motion and a second. We've already had questions. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Bennett?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Carabano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. So that's 4 ayes, 1 no. Motion carries. Thank you. So can we please take a 5-minute break and come back at 7:40?
So, hadn't been at Pillar Point in like a month, so I went last Wednesday night. New signs that say public can't park past a certain point.
Where are you looking at?
Drive in, drive toward the residential blocks, whatever they are. And now there are new signs that say you can't park without a permit.
They're new. They
I never noticed them. Maybe they replaced them. I never saw them
major
before.
replacement over the last year.
Okay, that's what it
Everywhere's
is.
been
Because
replaced.
that's
Yeah,
what it
it's
is.
like
Because
everything's
always
being
before I could park there, and I always was sure to park
They
in the
went through
lights.
this replaced everything because it was so bad.
I guess obviously I couldn't.
Well, we're trying to
Okay.
get it's so large.
Oh yeah, no, everything gets ruined, right?
Oyster Bay. You know, it's funny, I can't believe how much difference most saltwater environments
I know most people's cars, right? I grew up on the coast and I don't remember cars rusting out. Okay, so I was like, okay, so now I'm supposed to park out here in the boonies and walk out here at like 12:30. You have a big scratch across your lens. But yeah, well, it was a drastic difference because I noticed everybody then was parked down by the bathroom. But I just wondered, I was like, how safe is this? I'm like, walk out here, almost to Harbor Bar. But still, if I park there late at night, what's...
Well, there's some areas over by the Harbor Bar that are long-term
No, but I mean further. Okay, so down by the tenant bathrooms. So as well, the sign. I obviously didn't notice the sign. No, I understand, but now that the signs are there, I'm like, okay, so can I not park down there anymore to visit? He's usually there from, let's see, Tuesday through Saturday. He gets there early. He gets there at like 7:30, 7:30. Sunday, Monday. It's only one person.
Well, we're kind of one person with the I'm like, that's all.
24-hour Yeah, what are you supposed to do? I know. Here's the other thing I've been meaning to ask you. That boat that is off Oyster Point has been anchored out there forever, that Dauntless boat, how do they get away with that? Is it just enough? It's got to be just enough. Forever. Because I walk around every morning with my dog.
Bring your phone.
You know, I walk by every morning with my dog. I think I've seen somebody once. Not once. Back when it was sunny and warm, right? It's pretty brave too, because anybody can go and just get on it. Why am I not surprised? Oh, you mean Mahler? He's from Beats. He was trouble. So, as soon as I saw the letters and stuff coming, I was like, oh God, I don't even want him at the meetings. But see, you need to understand he caused major problems with everything, and he was out. He was one of the people who was trying to get a huge sum. He was trying to make money and everybody else. So be aware of this. It's just his Just so you know, his nickname was Evil. His nickname was Evil. And when I saw his boat, when I moved to Oyster Cove, I was like, oh God, oh God. He had to put that engine on to get it out. But remember, you guys all made like you did it like in one fell swoop. It was so smart. I don't know, I'm surprised you made it. know somebody who bought a second. Yeah, I know. But why did we Are you? Looking for a cruiser home? Well, I saw, really related, I was looking for the agenda, I saw the lead sale folks over here, they didn't look bad compared to the Oyster Point ones. I was like, oh, why did I miss those? Oh, really? I know, I have a friend who actually got pulled over because, and he said, I should have known better because there's such a big drug problem. Everybody has that. We have the beans, we've got the oysters. Yeah, I have to say, when I come over here and visit my friend, we sit on his apple deck and just hear the foghorn. Everybody always said that when coming over from Pete's, everybody said Wild Wild West.
Well, I don't think they've posted enough of these stories to put it down. I think that's all it is. The new ones go to the top, or they get back up.
Maybe somebody commented on double pop.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Well, it is the season to find a boat, right?
I went to James. Better tax.
Oh, true.
They're against the reorgs.
We are going to continue the meeting. And we are now at item 3, and I do have some cards. So why don't we have the report, then we'll have public comment, and then commissioners. So item 3, who will introduce item 3? Okay, Mr. Brunel.
Yeah, you have before you the staff report for this item. It's very simple. All that is being recommended is that the employment contracts for the key managers, the finance director, the human resource manager, and the harbor master have added to those contracts a provision for a 3-year term, and then to delete a section 3 paragraph B that would no longer be relevant or needed. However, what's important to keep in mind is that all other terms and conditions of each of the contracts remain the same, and in particular, these appointments and these contracts still provide for at-will employment. That's what they are now. They will continue to be at-will. And there would be no change in compensation terms or anything else. So it's just that, and so that's before you.
Thank you. Why don't we go to public comment then, before we get to commissioners? And I have 2. I have Ms. Leslie Webster and Mr. Leonard Warren.
Commissioners, you are all aware of the many management problems that have been reported. These include financial mismanagement and upper management's filing of multiple harassment complaints against the Commissioners soon after that Commissioner had filed a harassment complaint against the General Manager. Why is the General Manager recommending the Board approve an amendment to extend management agreements from at-will to 3-year contracts? The timing seems extremely ill-advised. Contract amendments should not be considered until after all pending harassment investigations have been completed.
Thank you. Mr. Warren?
With my commissioners, I would start out by asking what's broken that needs fixing. In my experience, non-represented supervisory personnel are always at will. I can't think of any in the multiple agencies that I've been involved with where the supervisory non-represented employees are not at will. And so, again, what's going on here that we don't know about, the manager is telling you about, well, he's going to get fired in January of 2015 after the next election when these two are gone and there's a new board majority. And then he'll go, and then the new manager will fire most of the rest of the office staff. So he's just trying to protect them now, and this is not necessary. You should not approve this. There's nothing broken here that needs fixing.
Thank you. Okay, we have now commissioner questions. Commissioners? Questions?
I have questions, but I seem to always go first, so maybe someone else wants to go first.
I don't know if there are other questions. Are there
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation of the general manager as pertains to the terms of employment for the Director of Finance, Human Resources Manager, and the Harbor Master to a 3-year contract, and the deletion of Section 3, Paragraph E. So moved.
Okay, I hear a motion, a second. Do I hear a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, I hear a second. So now we have questions. Commissioner Brennan.
Am I the only one with questions? So this is a question for the general manager. Why are you recommending this change?
I'm recommending this change simply because it is more or less consistent with some past practice. Other previous manager contracts did have time periods, which have been requested by those particular individuals. So those were adopted. So this is, in fact, nothing
When was
new.
that? What contracts were those specifically?
Harbor Masters.
Oh, Harbor Masters
Yeah.
had time, they were not at will?
Everyone, all right, let's get this really clear for the record, those who aren't listening. All managers' contracts have been, are, and will continue to be at will.
So if they're at will, and if at will means that you may be terminated at any time with or without cause, why would you add a 3-year clause to the agreement? Because it doesn't make sense to do that if they're at will. The two things are contradictory to each other. What's the
Not at
purpose?
all, not at all, if I may respond, Commissioner. The at-will condition is overriding, okay, so that's always in place. Nevertheless, having an actual stated term, in this case, I see as a way of providing, as far as I'm concerned, a vote of confidence in these 3 managers who have provided and continue to provide, in my estimation, outstanding service to this district and the public that we serve.
So it's,
And it's a way of recognizing them and saying, yes, we'd like to see you continue here, notwithstanding the fact that the basic underlying condition of these executive contract
of each position is at will.
So it's not really meaningful other than just, it doesn't really hold any legal meaning, is that correct? Gene, that's a question for you. Gene, why would we have a 3-year agreement and have an at-will agreement, all the same agreement?
I can only address what the language says. I think he's explained what his thinking is and proposing it to you. But if this is added, the way I would read this contract to say is that for the next 3 years, these 3 individuals have their terms of compensation and conditions of employment governed by this particular contract for a period of 3 years. The language that they are at will may be terminated at any time without cause is not suggesting that we take that out of the contract.
So that's going to stay in the contract?
Yes, that he indicated that in the statute.
Well, it's very confusing in this staff report. It's not clear to me. So that's why I'm asking, and I think that's why the public's confused too. It's a confusing memo. So the contracts, just so everybody knows that's here tonight, if you want to read the contracts, they're on the back table, all 3 of them. The current contracts without the amendments. And the suggested amendments are included in the board packet, which is, I believe, also back there on the table, hopefully. So, from a legal standpoint, by adding this language about this 3-year term or whatever, would that potentially do any harm to a future board or tie the hands of this board in any way or a future board differently than the contract as it's currently written?
No. They are at-will employees, they will remain as at-will employees.
So what it means is that they have to have a new contract in 3 years? Is that what that means?
It means this contract will have a term of 3 years.
So right now, the contract just sort of is indefinitely going.
Correct.
And so this would change it to only a 3-year contract versus, so it would create the need for new contracts in 3 years.
It is a contract with a 3-year term. Opposed to a contract with a 3-year term.
So really, all we're doing is instead of having an open-ended agreement, we're going to have a 3-year agreement.
That's correct.
And what advantage does that have for the district? I'm asking Jean.
I don't know if it's an advantage or a disadvantage, but the change is that instead of having an open-ended contract with these folks, you have a 3-year contract with them.
How does that affect the board from a legal standpoint?
If this change is made, these 3 individuals have the terms and conditions of their employment set for the next 3 years and governed by the terms of this contract. Right now, they have open-ended contract with those terms and conditions.
And I know you work for a lot of other city councils and special districts and whatnot. Do you find that with the management, I'm not talking about the general manager or the city manager, but with just like, say, your person in charge of finance or planning or whatever, do those people usually have a contract that's limited in number of years as being suggested now, or are they usually more open-ended contracts? I'm just curious about what's typical.
In the majority of clients that we represent, their upper management have organized, and so they are part of the collective bargaining unit, and they are covered by memorandums of understanding that are negotiated with the board. You don't have that situation.
So you don't work with any boards or councils that have management that are not unionized?
I have one client, and each one of those department heads has an employment contract.
Has an open contract?
Has an employment contract, and to the best of my recollection, they're open-ended.
Open-ended, okay. And what do you think is standard for most special districts? Do you have any idea?
I really can't speak to any broader experience than my own, and that's what I just shared with you.
All right, and then, so there are no consequences that we need to be aware of this change? Jean?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by consequences. The only thing that's being suggested here is that you move from an open-ended contract to a 3-year contract.
But could this have some financial consequences? Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to, if we're changing a contract, I want to make sure we're looking at it from all sides and the board's warned if there's any.
Well, the only financial consequence I see is one that perhaps could benefit the district, and that is that he's suggesting that Section E be removed, and that was the section that indicated that employees, if the general manager left, could not be terminated for a period of 90 days, and he's suggesting that that be removed.
So that means, just so I understand what that means, because I want to point out that these contracts were only just made available, like they weren't part of the board packet, so I'm just reading them now, I was trying to understand this. If that section is taken out, does that mean that if the general manager wanted to terminate one of the management people, they could do that without any, I mean, what's the point of the 90-day thing if they're at will? I don't understand that, and it doesn't really mean anything, does it, if they're at will?
Well, the way the contract currently reads is those individuals were at will, but under Section E, it indicated that if you had a change in your general manager, that the new general manager could not terminate employees for the first 90 days of his or her employment.
Okay.
There's a guarantee of continuation for 90 days under new management.
So if
you're suggesting that that be removed from the contract.
Okay, so if that were removed from the contract and a new general manager came on board, and they wanted to hire new management and let go of the current management, would the 3-year term end up potentially causing additional litigation or cost to the district or any kind of legal ramifications we should know about?
Well, I'll answer that question when I was that no one can ever guarantee you that someone won't sue when they have absolutely nothing to sue about. So, with that
Mr.
statement.
President, I'm going to rise to a point of order. The speaker having spoken for 10 minutes now is in violation of Robert's Rules of Order, and I call for the question.
How do you know it was 10 minutes? Because I don't think we have the timer on.
We do.
Who has the timer on?
I do.
Well, that's not the
Mr.
timer
President, I
right
call
here
for
that
the
we
question.
use. So I still have a few more questions.
I call for the question, Mr. President. That's not debatable.
Commissioner Brennan, we're going to vote on this today.
Well, I can't vote yes on something I haven't been able to ask all my questions on.
Well, we're going to vote now because the question's been called, and so what we're going to do is I would like to do a roll call on this.
Commissioner Bennett?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Carvana?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. We have 4 ayes and no. Motion carries. We are now at number 5. We are at item number 5, time limit for commissioners speaking on agenda items.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I ask that this item be placed on the agenda. At this time, for purposes of discussion, I would make a motion that commissioners' statements on agenda items outside of Robert's Rules of Order be limited to 5 minutes. I would so move.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, so questions?
On the question, if I may explain under the motion, Mr. President, members of the commission, it's not always, but there's occasions, we have 3-minute speaker limits for people in the audience, and the clerk keeps time for that. I think sometimes when the commission, and I'll speak for myself as well, get going on an issue or a motion, without a motion, we can tend to spend more than 5 minutes, and it might not be to the benefit of other members that have to listen to that. And that's why I asked for a 5-minute limit. This in no way has anything to do with anything being contrary to Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order comes into effect when an agency does not have clarification on what it wants to do for a certain agenda item in protocol. Right now, Robert's Rules of Order calls for a motion to be made, a speaker to be spoken the first time, and not to be heard until others have spoken, and then speak again for 10 minutes. And this has nothing to do with that. That would still be in effect. If there's a motion on the floor, the 10-minute rule would still be there according to Roberts. This is for items like maybe the statements by commissioners, maybe the bills and claims, maybe the reports by staff. 5 minutes is ample time to ask questions. And if there's something more serious, the member can certainly meet with the staff member before the meeting to discuss issues. But I think 5 minutes is fair and it keeps the meeting moving. So that's the discussion on my motion, Mr. President.
Thank you. Questions?
What happened to public comment?
Where's public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay, that was the end of the report. Yes, before we get to commissioner questions, thank you. Sorry about that. We do have 4 cards on this. We have, and I'm just going to take them in this order. It'll be Merrill Bobiel, Leonard Warren, Leslie Webster, Bill Kehoe. So, Mr. Bobiel?
Yes, good evening, President Bernardo and Commissioners. My name is Merrill Bobiel, and I do have some comments about item 5, but actually before I do that, I sort of like to have some idea of knowing whether the comments are going to appear in the minutes of the Harbor District Commission meetings, because that's the only record. Okay. The minutes are the official record, okay, of the Commission's meetings. And Commissioner Brennan spoke at the beginning of the meeting, and that was really the question I had, is what advantage would there be for the public to make a comment on any item on the agenda if nothing more than the name of the person was going to appear in the minutes. In other words, there was no summary of what the person had to say. So I'd sort of like to really know ahead of time whether the minutes are going to reflect anything about what one says. I don't know if this, the buzzword in the past always was transparency and openness of meetings, particularly public meetings. And I think that's really the question that has to be asked here. I have a comment, and that is that I think that in government, in particular, it's important to have that openness and transparency at the local level. If we are going to expect this at other levels of government, of both the state and the federal government. We live in a time when there's a lot of criticism of government, and it seems to be that it's really important to have our public meetings available for public consumption. Okay, in other words, videotaping, something more than a podcast. Okay, I don't think that the minutes of a public meeting are going to appear on any bestseller list. Okay, but I think it's important that they be accurate. Okay. Now I'll move on to the comments. I think that using the same rationale of openness and transparency, limiting speech to 5 minutes simply doesn't make sense. And having a 2-tier system of following Robert's Rules of Order for some things, 10 minutes on each time for up to 2 items, I think is probably more accurate. But I think that 5 minutes is not really a question, and I would oppose it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Warren?
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. When you look at Robert's rules, it's painfully clear that it's intended for very large bodies, the Senate, the House of Representatives, and for a 5-member board, Robert's rules is really silly. My board explicitly, according to our code, does not run under Robert's rules. It's never been an issue. on Midcoast Council, which I was on for one full term, explicitly does not run under Robert's rules, and it's not been a problem. Now, in most situations, the time limits on board members might be okay. Maybe sometimes I've been sitting at public meetings wishing that they applied the same time limits to the elected officials that they do to members of the public. But the problem here is, once again, this is aimed specifically at stifling one commissioner, Commissioner Brent. And it wouldn't be a problem if staff didn't stonewall her when she tries to get her questions answered offline. So they won't talk to her offline, and now you won't let her get her questions answered during the meetings. This is, all of you need to be in jail, except her.
Thank you. Ms. Webster?
I'm puzzled as to why Commissioner Tucker is attempting to limit the ability of his fellow commissioners to ask questions. This appears to be yet another shameless attempt to prevent Commissioner Brennan from doing her job. Commissioner Tucker and Commissioner Colsinger, you are appalling and embarrassing in your effort to tie the hands of the board, obstruct transparency, and bring the public process to a grinding halt.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe?
Good evening, Commissioners. Bill Keough, Long Beach. I agree with the three speakers that went before me. I really feel, I didn't want to come here tonight, but I've been watching this progression going on now for quite a few months, where this board is turning insular and is shutting down all open and free discussion, which you are mandated to do for the public, not for each other, but for the public. And if one commissioner has questions they're asking, the public wants them to answer those questions, and they should be entertained, and we shouldn't be allowing time limits that are just basically tearing the majority to shut down any kind of opposing questions. Now, I know I said this before, and I'm really getting to a point. We had a similar situation with the fire board, and we went through an expensive, time-consuming campaign that has a recall. Fortunately, we don't have to do this here because you're coming up for elections soon. But you are giving us enough fodder to come up with a hell of a campaign strategy to kick you out. And I'll tell you, I don't like to threaten people. It's not my style. But I cannot sit here and watch four grown men pick on a woman who is new to the board, who is being stonewalled. We all see it. We read about it and talk about it in review. It's not just like you guys, the fact that we have to have a public person spend time to put this on video so people can see it. And then you go and you change your minutes and actions so we can't even read the minutes to see what is going on unless we show up at the meetings, are all showing that you want to shut the public out. And that will be the campaign and I'll kick you out. Now, you can look at me like I'm dumb for the rest of it. I did it before, and I'll tell you, I'm going to do it again. You're on my product.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners' questions. Are there any questions?
I have some questions.
Okay, Commissioner Brennan?
So I would agree with the public comment earlier that most of the special districts, a lot of city councils, a lot of boards in general for local government do not follow Robert's Rules of Order. In fact, I can't think of one that I know of, that I go to meetings for, that actually does follow Robert's Rules of Order. And this board doesn't follow Robert's Rules of Order to the T by any means. So I know that we've had input from another member of the public who really supports Robert's Rules of Order. However, if you read Robert's Rules of Order, it's clear that it is really for a much larger body at a higher level of government. And there's really no other way to interpret it. I mean, you read the rules and it's clear that that's what the rules are intended for a larger body and a higher level of government. I do think that there is some good information in the rules that's useful, so I do think that it's a good reference guide. I see the value in it. But this particular motion is not consistent with Robert's rules, and it's being made by someone who has been, in the past, repeatedly wanting to, or saying that he wants to follow Robert's rules. So it's in conflict with, the motion is in conflict with previous information provided by the commissioner, so that's a little confusing. I do feel specifically targeted by the motion, so I'm just going to say that. And if you read the Half Moon Bay Review today, on the front page are comments by the motion maker that specifically target me and name me by name. So I don't think I'm imagining it. You know, to continue to try to shut down the public process, I am very disappointed with this motion. I'm certainly not going to be supporting it, and in Robert's Rules of Order, it clearly says no member shall speak more than twice during the same day to the same question, only once on appeal, nor longer than 10 minutes at one time. That's the rule. So to create some other system that's confusing and not consistent doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm definitely not going to be voting for that. Thank you.
Commissioners, are there any other questions? Commissioner Carvana?
So just to be clear to the maker of the motion, that this is specific to all items on the agenda, including the consent calendar, commissioner requests, new business, staff reports, operations, and then committee reports and commission statements.
All items on the agenda that do not have a motion on the floor. If there's a motion on the floor, Robert's Rules of Order would take precedent. And this motion has nothing to do with Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Holtzman. No, please.
I don't have a question.
I just have two. One is to Commissioner Tucker. So for example, let's say, based on what you just said, so let's say like commissioner statements. Would that apply for commissioner statements?
Yes.
So 5 minutes for a commissioner statement, okay. And committee reports, things like, in other words, things that are not on the agenda item where there's
A motion.
where there's a motion. Okay, I see. Okay, second question is to council. Are we bound, is the Harbor District in any way bound by Robert's rules? Do we have to conform to Robert's rules?
Public entities in the state of California are not required to comply with Robert's Rules of Order. Many public agencies look at them as a guide to assist them in running their meetings, but elected officials are entitled to adopt policies and procedures to manage their meetings, and many of those, if you look at them, have time limits imposed both on the public, sometimes under public comment, and on commissioner statements, presentations as well, so that you can get through the business, the public's business that you're hearing about. It's not, in my experience, it's not unusual.
Can you name any that you know of that do have time limits on the board members' comments?
Yes, I don't speak to those clients that you represent. I haven't surveyed the field. Foster City, I believe it's in their ordinance, has time limits on the order of speech and on the time that council members can address certain items.
And what are those?
I believe it's 5 minutes. I have to go back and read the code. It's not been an issue. in that
Do they
city,
enforce
but,
it?
It's not been an issue in that city. Most of the statements are very short and meetings run pretty quickly, so it's not been an issue there.
So they're not enforcing.
There's been no need to enforce, so I can't say whether they would or not, because their meetings tend to run very quickly. I believe the town of Woodside has a practice. I don't believe it is, I'm sorry, I don't look to these, so I don't know if it's in its written policy, but there's very particular way in which they conduct their meeting. They allow everyone to have one opportunity to speak. Again, there really, in my many years, there really haven't been issues about any long speeches by any individuals that have called your question with this issue.
So if I could ask, finish up with my questions. I'm sorry, do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. If I could just finish up. So what I'm hearing then is that really it's up to the governing body to sort of make their own rules. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
It is, but keeping in mind that everyone who comes to the meeting should have an opportunity to speak. So, for example, if you adopted a rule that said only the president will speak on these particular agenda items, that would not be appropriate.
So in other words,
What the law says is that everyone should have an opportunity to speak. Then it is up to the board to determine how you want to run your meeting and what time limit you want to impose in order to get through the business to meeting.
thank you. So that is exactly where the gray area is then, correct? Because that's where the flexibility is depending upon the governing body.
Correct.
So it really, what I'm hearing then, okay, and if you could just, I know this may be a strange question, but depending upon the governing body, it really is a philosophical question by each governing body. They have to determine, for example, you just mentioned Foster City or Woodside, that is that particular culture of that governing body, how they wish to govern themselves. And let's say they want quicker meetings and they want 3-minute speeches or whatever, then that's up to them. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So it's really individual.
And
is what I'm hearing.
sometimes it is agenda driven. If you have an agenda where you have an item and you have 150 people who want to speak to you, at that meeting, the board may decide to impose different time limits. It's a policy question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, what type of government do you believe in? That's kind of the question. Okay, okay, that concludes my questions. Thank you. Let's vote, and can we, any other questions for the call? Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Carvana? Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
No. That's 3 ayes, 2 noes. The motion carries. Motion passes. Thank you. So we are now at item 6, bills and claims in the amount of $266,220.73.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I review the bills and claims and make a motion to approve in the amount of $266,220.73. And if I have a second, I have a comment to make.
Okay, I hear a motion. Can I hear a second?
On the question of the motion, Mr. President, there was one faux pas, if you will. We sent our annual payment to the Department of Boat and Waterways, but this past year they were assigned to Park and Recreation Department. So our check was kicked back and we were asked to issue a new check to the Park and Recreation Department in the amount of $1.3-something million. But that is just a little faux pas and our payment was accepted.
Thank you. Question on that though. So are we being leveraged a fee, a late fee or anything like that?
No, it's due December 31st.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. Any questions on bills and claims for Treasurer Tucker?
I have some comments I want to make about bills and claims. So I put in a request early last week to receive the bills and claims via PDF file due to the fact that it is not appropriate for me to be at the administrative office due to the harassment complaint that I filed in August. And that's where the bills and claims are located. Also, in light of the 2 harassment complaints that were filed against me in October, I don't want to put the staff who may or may not have filed a harassment complaint against me in a situation where they have to have any sort of one-on-one meeting with me. That doesn't feel appropriate. So I made the request to receive PDF of the bills and claims, and I've already explained why I want to look at the bills and claims, but if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to explain that again. I was told no by the general manager. Then I was told whatever. Then I was told that he would provide the PDF, but it would only come after the meeting where we vote on those bills and claims. So the PDF would not be provided in advance of the vote, the decision on the particular bills and claims. So essentially, it would be useless. I'm still asking for the PDF, but I'd like the PDF to come in advance of the vote. And I think that that's reasonable. And I think it's a wise thing to do. So that's what I requested. I just wanted to let everybody here know that I was not provided with the bills and claims in advance of this meeting. I have not looked at them. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennan. This does raise a kind of just a very unusual situation because of the claims that are going on, and it's understandable that that you wouldn't be asked to be in a situation that would compromise any type of investigation or claims or anything like that. So can we have staff look at this situation and try to find a solution that wouldn't, be,
May I comment?
Yes, Mr.
President. Okay, first of all, on the subject of these harassment complaints, I've checked with counsel, and there's nothing that precludes Commissioner Brennan from coming to the administration office to look at the bills and claims. For example, the treasurer comes to the office to look at the bills and claims. She could come at that time and look at them and not come in contact with people who she may feel uncomfortable coming in contact with for whatever reasons. That's number one. Number two, as to providing the PDS, it's simply not possible. And the reason is that the bills and claims become prepared and available on the Monday or Tuesday when the treasurer has typically come to review them. And there is simply not enough time to unstaple all those bills and invoices and put them in and scan them and turn them into PDA.
And for if I can interrupt you, and just for the public's information, when I was the treasurer before Treasurer Tucker, I would come in on Fridays, and I remember I'd come in bright and early, and my stacks averaged this high. Okay? They would average this high, and I would have to go through each, I went through each one and made sure that all the numbers were okay, but they're this high. So from a photocopying and PDFing perspective, I mean, yeah, you could do it. It would take, I would say, at least an hour. I mean, more than an hour. I mean, or more than that. But yeah, I know you're shaking your head. It would take a while. So, Commissioner Tucker, do you have a solution?
I have another comment.
Let me ask a question first. Procedurally, what I do is I go in there the Tuesday before the meeting, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And when I go in, I can choose to talk to staff or not talk to staff. The basket this high is sitting in the conference room with a ruler and a pen. And I go in here, if I want coffee, I get it, or when I close the door and I do my business. Why couldn't you prepare the same thing for Commissioner Brennan?
So first, I'd like to...
Is that possible? Sure. I mean, if you can do it for me, you can do it for her, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so we got the answer
It's
there.
possible for any treasurer or any individual who wants to see it.
To not have contact with anyone.
Sure.
The door would just be open, or okay.
That's what happens.
Commissioner Brennan.
So first of all, the first point was by the general manager that I could come in and meet with Commissioner Tucker when he reviews the bills and claims. That is not a good solution because I have no idea if Commissioner Tucker has filed a harassment complaint against me. He is considered staff. He receives a paycheck at this district. So therefore, that is not a good solution. It doesn't make any sense. And that assumes that, that assumes a lot. So that's not logical.
I didn't file a complaint for the record. It's not I. One down.
Well, I don't know. You
But I
filed
can-
complaints.
but you can
You're not
please-
supposed to know.
Okay, can we please, Commissioner Brennan, just finish with your question?
So the next point is regarding, I did go to the meeting, to the office to review bills and claims, not for this week's bills and claims, but for the last meeting. I was not allowed to look at the bills and claims by myself. I had Deborah there part of the time, and I had Marietta Harris come in and refuse to leave and start berating me and shut me in the room with the door shut. And I sent you guys an email about it. I sent you an email about this, so you know about it. So that's what happened. So I'm not comfortable going there because I was locked in the conference room with her and I had to get out. I didn't want to be there by myself in the conference room with her. I didn't know if she filed a harassment complaint against me or not, and I didn't think it was appropriate. And I don't know why she's leaving.
Just for the record, I did not berate you. I will not be lied about. I have never in my 30-something years, I've been working since I was 16 years old, and I have never, ever been talked to like this or treated like this in my entire life, or been told I am a liar. I am not a liar. I have never been a liar. I pride myself on my professionalism, and I'm straying far from that right now, and I'm embarrassed that I have to do it, but I did not berate you. I was asked to be in there by a member of staff. She was in there so that she could explain the bills and claims to you if you had any questions, and you were in there by yourself. I did not hover over you the whole time. Period. So I'm sorry that we see those two things differently, but I did not do that, and I did not berate you, and I would never berate you.
Excuse me, but it's my turn now.
I won't be lied about. I didn't do that.
Let's have Commissioner Brennan finish, and then we'll try to find a solution here.
You did hover over me, you did shut the door, and you did...
I shut the door because as an HR manager, I was trying to explain to you that I felt that it was inappropriate for you to ask questions about a complaint against you, because I felt that you need to step away from the subject so the complaint can happen as it should happen, and then we can get to the bottom of what the problems are here at the Harbor District.
Okay.
That's why I asked you, in my HR professional opinion, that you should stay away from some of those items. That's all I asked you to do.
Ms. Harris, I do not want dialogue going back and forth right now because it's inappropriate.
It is inappropriate, but I will not be lied about.
So, Commissioner Brennan, if you have questions for Ms. Harris, can you please ask them outside of this discussion we're having right now on bills and claims?
I think you get the point, that it's not appropriate for me to be at the administrative office. I think the point has been well illustrated here.
Understood. So again, I will go back to my original, what I said originally, that I will have staff find a solution where you will be able to somehow look at bills and claims and not be in a situation that puts anyone in an uncomfortable situation.
There's no reason to have any volatile situations. It's so unnecessary. We have scares. We have email.
Lied about.
Okay. So staff, again, I don't want to take up the entire public's time discussing how we're going to do this. So if we could just have
Yes, I will
come
tell
up
you
with some
what,
solution.
I will tell you what we will do so everybody knows. We will put the bills and claims in the conference room like we always do, and we will have them there. We will enable Commissioner Brennan to come there and by herself sit and look at the bills and claims. She can come there, we can let her know after the treasurer has seen them, or she can come the following day.
Mr. President, I rise to a point of order.
Yes.
The motion before the board is the approval of the bills and claims. The motion has been seconded. This is far afield of the business before the commission. I call the question.
You're right, and I apologize. You're right. So let's vote on bills and claims.
Thank you.
Yes, let's vote on bills and claims. And Commissioner Brennan, if we could take this issue up during commission statements. Okay. So can we please have a roll call on this?
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Carvana? Commissioner Cutler? President Bernardo?
Aye. That's 4 ayes and 1 no. Bills and claims, motion passes. So we are now at item number 7, which is authorization to pay bills and claims occurring between December 5th and January 14th in an amount not to exceed $900,000. Can you please explain this? Staff, I know that we do this every year, but can you please explain this once again for the benefit of those who don't understand what this $900,000 thing is all
We're
about?
missing 2 bills and claims.
Okay.
And That gives us between 4 and 5 weeks of having to make payments to our vendors. $900,000 represents monthly bills and claims, plus we have a couple capital projects that I don't know, sometimes we move forward and we spend on them or not, but we have an encumbrance with them, so if we finish the project in the 5 weeks, we do owe them the payment, and that's in about $300,000. So that's how I came up with $21.
Thank you. So again, basically just to cover over the holidays.
Some of the holidays.
Because there's going to be no commission meetings and we can't vote on these things, that's what this is for.
Move to approve item 7.
Question.
Yeah.
Quick question. Could there be a mechanism in the future where we authorize the general manager, someone, or you, we deputize someone, so that this doesn't have to keep coming back every holiday, every year? Does it? Really? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, I'm like, did I hear a motion?
I made a motion. I didn't hear a
I'm
second.
sorry, second?
Second.
Okay. Let's have a roll call, and then I just got a public comment on this item that I'll have you speak after. But roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Pirovano? Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye, that's 4 ayes, 1 no, motion carries. I had an item on number 7 that just came in, so, Mr. Warren?
There's one aspect of this district's procedures that I am not familiar with on the 2 boards that I'm on. All the checks are dual signature checks where they have to be signed by the manager and the director. And both boards have procedures for signing checks that can't wait until the next board meeting for approval. So I'm wondering, I'm really uncomfortable with delegating it completely to staff. I think you need to have at least one commissioner as a double check on all these things, especially when they're paid in advance of approval by the board. So, the obvious choice would be the treasurer has to approve. It doesn't have to be the treasurer, but it would be an obvious default that some commissioner has to approve all of these interim payments before the checks go out. Really think you need to do that.
Thank you. We are now at staff reports, admin, finance, and these are, the general manager's report, director of finance, human resources manager. Mr. Brunel, you want to kick it off?
Yes, you have my report. I'll take any questions you have.
Okay, commissioners, any questions on the general manager's report?
There was a question you were going to come back to. Do you remember what that was earlier?
Well, let's think about that for a minute. There was something you were going to elaborate on in your report. That's in your report now, that the commissioner needs. Which one was that?
The real estate appraisal.
Oh, the real estate appraisal.
Yes.
Oh, tonight? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, yes, I do have an update on that for you. I have contacted an appraiser, and I am waiting for his proposal, which will provide cost and timeline. As soon as that happens, we'll engage him unless it's unacceptable, in which case we'll get another one.
Yeah, I don't know how long that property will stay on the market. I should have said that.
A few weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner, questions for the general manager. Commissioner Brennan, did you have other questions?
So you expect that the appraisal will happen in January, or in December?
I would hope, and I underline hope, to put it on the January 18th agenda in closed session for your review.
So it would have been done by then?
Yeah, that's what I hope, but again, I haven't received back, so I don't know what his timeline is.
do have a question for the general manager. Mr. Grinnell, have you kept track of the number of PRA requests we've received this calendar year?
Oh, yes, we have. I haven't totaled them up. I would have to sit down and put together the information.
I simply ask that because I know we've received quite a number this year.
Yes.
At least in relationship to prior years.
Yes.
So I would like to just have some idea the total number of PRA requests that we've had this year.
Certainly.
That we've been responding.
Yes, and I heard a question from, a statement from the public earlier, so we'll pull that together.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions for General Manager before we go to Director of Finance? Because I know that Commissioner Brennan had something to ask with the Director of Finance. Okay, Commissioner Brennan, you had a question for Director of Finance, I believe?
Yeah, I'm just trying to follow up on some of the questions that I keep getting from the public that they seem to be having a hard time getting a response back on. One question is, what's the status of rent collection? And by that, I think what's meant is, are many tenants behind on rent? Is everybody in pretty good standing? Do we require a deposit so that we ensure that we have money to cover rent if there are any problems? Are there any plans to change policy there or anything like
Well,
that?
when a tenant comes in, they're required to give us, for a monthly work rental, they're required to give us a security deposit in their first month of rent. It states in their birthing agreement that they will issue payment for their slip fees on the first of every month. And when they decide to leave, they're required to give us a 30-day termination notice, just like you would if you rented an apartment. And so let's say they say on May 1st, I'm leaving. Well, by June 1st, they're gone. And usually when they leave, you apply their security deposit to any unpaid rents or electricity or things of that nature. We do have a collection policy when they fall in arrears. We do follow procedures to collect that money. And currently, they were doing it at the harbors. Right now, we're trying to pull that up to finance so that someone who may be very angry about falling in arrears and having to make payments to not take it out on someone in the accounting tech world that can call and work it out with us and we work with them. So collections is an ongoing basis. It's every day. It's making sure that people pay their rent. So we're just serious about it and working hard to keep on top of it.
So I know with some other marinas in the South Bay, they have, I don't know if it's a bond or maybe Scott knows more about this, but they require a significant deposit so that there are really no risks or very few risks for the actual marina in the event that something bad would happen, like a boat were to sink or something. I know that just happened recently. We had a boat.
Like an insurance policy.
Yeah, I guess
We have different policy coverage requirements. It just depends on what, let's say they have a fire, and other boats the boat is the one that burns, and all of a sudden starts moving the fire to the other one, so the fire department can start. That protects the other boats. I don't know if that answers the question.
So do we have,
There's
we have requirements for
yeah.
insurance,
There's
yes.
minimal requirements for every boat that comes in.
and you think those are sufficient as they are?
I think they're very sufficient right now. We don't have covered mortgage, which a lot of marinas like up in the Delta areas do.
What's it called?
Covered mortgage, where you see a boat that pulls into what looks like a garage carport. And those, if we had those, I'd be saying we need to look at the dollar insurance and increase it, because when there is a fire, those travel horizontally. And so you'll have a lot more road damage. But here, usually when you have a fire or a similar problem, it stays in one spot. it doesn't travel too far, if at all.
Thank you. So I know that there's been a lot of stuff going on with refunding deposits and all of that showing up. How much money's involved with that? Like, I forgot what the dollar amount was of the deposits that we were holding that needed to be refunded. Or just a rough estimate.
Cost, I mean, we could look and see what it was June 30th.
Couple thousand.
No, it's more than that.
Maybe less than.
I noticed just in the sense of what I see going through where it goes to finance is that there's usually anywhere from $10 return of deposit to a couple hundred typically.
Yeah, 310, 20, 227, 268, 396.
Oh, you're talking about the refunds,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
I
she's talking
thought you
No, I
asked a
meant-
different question.
I think you and I were on the same page.
What did you mean?
So like, I think she's asking, what do we hold in deposits? So like for the year, or June, there was 288,000. And that's for both facilities together.
And is some of that money what we're slowly reimbursing people that should have?
So what happens is like the auditor said, we have, we hold this money in a liability, and then we have people that pay rent. And so when John Doe leaves, and his rent's $640, and he has $100 electricity, and he leaves, he has a deposit on hand of $640. When he says, I'm gone and my road's gone, we take that liability and we apply it to his receivable. That's where you might have a negative receivable. That's when we write a check. We say, out of your security deposit, you had, we collected for rent and this and that, and this is what's remaining. So we do have, I think this Bills and Claims has a lot of refund deposits, and that's because I'm going through and making sure that everyone left has their money, because what was happening in the past is people would leave and float off and say, oh, keep my deposit, I'll be back. Well, the problem is if someone's back 3 years from now, maybe their address has changed, or sometimes people might think, since we have their money, we're saving them a slip. That they think that, oh, they have my deposit, so, oh, that means they have a space for me. And sometimes that's, it just sends a wrong message. I think it's cleaner to reduce our liabilities and just, if you come back, we'll just start you with a new deposit.
So how is that process going? Are you getting done with it, or are you about halfway done with it?
Oh, almost all, yeah, pretty good.
So we won't see so many of those.
I would say the next couple Bills and Claims, but yeah.
But some of it never goes away just because people.
Right, there's always
Yeah.
going to be some need to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks for,
Well, that's a good point, because during what do you call it, and that's the other reason why there's a lot of deposits, is during the craft season or during the fishing season, someone might come and rent for 3 months. Well, now 3 months later, I'm issuing them a check. And a good example, I took a picture with my phone, was our accounting tech at Pillar Point had 40 new slips in a week. Well, that's 40 new checks going to be cut in 3 months. So it is an ongoing process. You just have to make sure you stay on top of it.
so I was contacted by Shane Hale.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you've already communicated with him.
Yeah, he actually sent me a very pleasant email thanking me for the account status they gave him. We're working together. He's, going to look through with his wife with his checks and get back to me. But, we worked out what his problems were, and he was happy so far.
So I
should
understand.
keep you posted.
So there was a lien put on his boat? Is that what happened? Because he said he had to go to the DMV, that there was a
Well,
lien.
that's where things get sticky, is that he sold the boat to someone else. Well, he didn't transfer title. So when that someone else wasn't paying their bill, it's kind of like if you sold your car and someone didn't process the title and registration, you would still be getting the bill. So it's more involved,
So is that what happened?
Yeah, and I explained it to him.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then another question somebody had was, we've had an account temps employee, I guess, at Oyster Point Marina. I don't know if I didn't have that right. Maybe it's at the admin office.
No, you're right. Oyster Point.
Oh, at Oyster Point. And is that person the acting receptionist? Or
Yes.
Okay.
And it got voted on. I actually printed a copy of that.
I think I
It
remember.
came to the board because we didn't have anyone when the
So were they,
employee left. We had to actually have someone else answer the phones, take the payments.
okay, so they're doing more than just being a receptionist. They are actually handling.
Yeah, they're opening accounts, they're applying payments, they're,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
And then, let's see. The question has come up numerous times about whether or not you're aware that we're an enterprise district and following the rules, the financial rules for an enterprise district. So we are doing that?
Yeah, yes, I'm doing what was
All right, so I just wanted to make sure that was really clear that we were all on the same page, because I know there's been a lot of confusion about
what is and what's not.
what is an
Yes.
enterprise district, so I'll clear that. That's it, thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? Maybe not. Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Oh, I thought of one more.
Okay.
Last question, I've been asked this question now lately a lot by the public. What are your qualifications? Do you have a CPA degree? That question has been asked numerous times.
Okay.
I have the qualifications.
Can I just interrupt here?
please do.
You know, I understand your question, and I understand the public's curiosity as to what people's, backgrounds and credentials are. I find that question, I mean, personally, if I were sitting as the director of finance, if someone asked me that, I personally would feel offended.
I am.
It would be kind of offensive to me. I mean, I don't know, that's just my take on it, and I don't know if that's appropriate to ask.
As a board, we do need to know these things, because this is the person that we are entrusting with our finances for the district, and we are ultimately responsible for the way the district is being run. And so it's important that we know that it's not like I'm asking a bookkeeper that. I'm asking our finance director. This is our finance director who is responsible
Point of
for.
information. When you voted for her, you should have asked those questions then.
I agree. I should have, but I didn't. I agree, that was a mistake. I should have asked then.
CPA is not a requirement for that.
I didn't say that it was a requirement, I'm just asking for clarification.
Okay,
And we should have all asked that question then.
Well, here's the thing.
Point of order, please.
Yes.
This is not a question about the report.
Yeah.
We've gone far afield of the purpose
I
and
agree.
scope of this agenda item.
I think your question is better asked outside of this, this particular, setting, because
Terribly,
it's,
it's not my question, first of all, it's the public's question, and they
Right.
have asked repeatedly, and they have not been given an answer, which is why they brought it to my attention to try to get an answer to the question. So the public has asked, they haven't gotten an answer.
Okay, so I know the public member that you're talking about, and I said I'm not a CPA, and neither was Marcia Schnapp, and neither was Genevieve Frederick, and neither were other members.
Okay.
And so I am offended, and I'm glad you brought that word up, because I find it completely offensive.
Ms. Galarza, thank you. I personally feel that you do not have to stick.
And I'm leaving.
I personally feel that you do not have to take all of this.
That's
kind of thing. So I just.
And I apologize if you found what I said offensive, so I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 11. Operations, Harbor Master Grindy.
Sorry, you have my report, but I did want to make two additional comments here. As you recall, and I forgot to write down the date, but we brought to the board for going out to bid for the concession building sewer line liner project. It went out to bid. The bidders that might have bid did not bid. So we're working on making some informational changes and such to the bid so we can go back out to bid. Anticipate bringing that back to the board probably the January, first January meeting, it's not the second. It's hard to bid during the holiday season, it's like, and the second item was on the sewer line under the pier. I found out from state parks that there is some minor amount of grant money, but I recommend to the board straight up that we don't move there because it would take us another 4 or 5 months to get the project done, and it's only about $20,000. And it's $170,000 and change project. And we could not start the project until we get the grant money. So it'd be much of a delay. So anyway, you have my report. Any questions?
Any questions for Harbor Master Brittany?
I didn't quite follow what happened with the sewer line. Could you explain that a little bit better?
Well, there's a grant process out there for federal money because it has a pump out for boats. And they would not fund all the line work, but they would fund a portion of it. But the percentage is so small, that I want to be transparent as far as what could be available. We probably want to do it in future work that is only for pump out system, because that's what it was designed for, was just for pump outs.
I see.
If that was one line just went straight to the pump out, it would be honky-dory.
Oh,
But it's not, it has a whole bunch of mixed use to it.
right.
So it makes it fractionally just a piece of it. And it's too small to really, the contractor had a delay amount in there, you know, so then all of a sudden we had to go, the cost value of that grant goes down to almost nothing pretty much.
And so when do you think that project, like, so now you have to go out, you said you have to go out to bid a second time?
No, you're talking about project, you're talking
Okay.
concession building.
Oh, that's the other sewer line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I wish we had two different names that were so drastically different because the combination of names sounds similar. But on the pier project, it's moving ahead. Contracts are signed. Contractor should be giving me, we gave them notice to proceed.
On the pier?
On the pier, yeah.
Okay.
We're just waiting for them to come back and say we're going to be doing our pre-construction meeting probably the next couple of days. They do their lay down of pipe and ordering and everything else and get rolling.
Right. But the other project then is going to go back out to bid a second time?
Potentially, yeah.
And that was because the wrong people bid, or they?
No, the bidders did bid.
Nobody bid?
Nobody bid.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I do have a question, please.
Commissioner Wilson?
First of all, I want to commend you on the progress that's been made regarding the offshore buoys, weather buoys. I saw that was on KTVU. And I want to note that part of that seems to be as a result of a meeting that you organized and held at the Harbor Master office not too long ago. Do you have any other meetings planned?
Not at this time. I'd love to have more, but I think that, we had over 14 people show up. And the impact is there as far as the meeting again. It might be something in the January month, I think. A lot of people just won't attend during the holiday season anyway. And with the crabbing going on, the fishermen are not going to show up because they're out fishing. But I really think that the more immediate impact we have, we gain more credibility with it.
That raises one other question. What's the size and catch for the crabs this season? I understand the crabs are a bit smaller and the catch is down overall.
I haven't had a lot of detail on that right now.
Just one thought, Congresswoman Spear has been really involved with the
Phenomenally involved.
Yeah. If you could find your way clear to send her a copy of that KTVU report.
I already did.
That's awesome. I mean, she recently sent us a letter, a beautiful letter, commending the rescue effort.
Yeah.
And I know she's really on top of the buoy situation, and that would just give her a little more ammunition.
Her staff have been tremendously helpful, doing other things for us as far as getting the word out.
And I know that Congresswoman Anna Ishii was involved also, because they were together at a recent function that I attended. And I know she knows.
Great.
Any other questions for Harbor Master Brittany? Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, we are now at item 12, we're approaching 9 o'clock, and we're at item 12, which is committee reports for which... Oh, you know what? Actually, before that, I want to apologize to a speaker because I just noticed, I got lost in this. Item number 9, back to Director of Finance. Mr. Olam had a comment card, and, Director of Finance is But if you would like to, Mr. Olam, if you'd like to take this time right now to... This was under number 9, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir, and I believe that it was appropriate that she did leave. She wasn't in life, what we're talking about. On the questions lately, your requests have been related to financial things. And the other day, I was invited to come to the office and look at check reconciliations and make sure meetings. I went in there, and the same thing happened to me, pretty much, that happened to Commissioner Grant. First, Ms. Galarraza came in, and Ms. Harris came in, and we sat down in front of it. And before I got much to look at it, conversation moved from pretty okay to way south. I was accused of slandering people because of the questions I was asking. I was told that harassment charges were going to be filed against me because I'm the one who asked what were your qualifications to be a financial director. The reason I asked that question is because she keeps using the word audit and then telling me that that's not what's going on. And she said a few other things that I said, maybe wonder does she really know what she's talking about. So I just asked. And I was told yes, that she has no CPA or no certificate. Eventually I was told that she'd gone to school a decade or so ago, had a bachelor's degree, and it was sort of indicated to me that she might have had some training at that time. I don't know if that's the case or not. I've been trying to get, while I was there, that's when I found out that Level's negative numbers were part of prepayments. So I've since asked for accounts receivable reports with unredacted account numbers so they can actually track. I said, Sarah's pointed out a $7,000 approximately prepayment, and I can't find where that $7,000 goes from $7,000 to $650 or $6,000 or $5,000. And I really can't say what's going on because, as you know, without the account numbers, I mean, this list is quite long, it's hard for me to say that that number goes to that account and then look at, compare it to another month's and say that number goes to that account. And so I asked for that, and Mr. Grinnell sent me redacted invoices. With the same exact redacted data. There's no way to know. I've asked for things like emails and liens, things that people who were harassed over the problems with at the collections of checks and stuff like that at OPM. And while I did receive one email from the Paul Marr guy, which frankly did not reflect well on him, that's the only one I got. Yet I have seen others, and people have told me that these things exist, and I haven't gotten them yet. Now, I'll go real quick on the last one. Nobody has quantified yet how much of the auto deposits are part of the accounting problem at OPM. They had a system there, or you have a system that takes people's credit cards and is supposed to automatically charge them. The Paul Marr, his bill is $2,000. It's missed 6 payments on it. I've asked, how much have you collected from people like that who missed payments? I'm told, we don't know. I've asked, how much more is there like that? I'm told, we don't know. The same kind of behavior you've seen from Ms. Harris and Ms. Galazar was exhibited toward me. I was the one that had my back to the window. I never threatened anybody. And I know I can be smart ass, but I thought I was being on my best behavior. Well, you might have thought that was funny, but when there's 2 people sitting in front of me trying to explain why I'm wrong, and give me a chance to look at what I'm seeing.
Okay, this isn't supposed to be a conversation, this is public comment. I'm sorry, Mr.
This is the second time that she's made a conversation when I've been speaking. This is professionalism of her staff. These are the people that are asking for 3-year contracts. So I really think you need to start thinking about what's going on there and how they're treating people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Mayor Levy, has a harassment charge been filed against me? Can you answer that? Because that was threatened. When I was leaving, before that, before Ms. Salazar stopped out of the room, she said, I'm filing harassment charges against you. She was there, she saw it, and I believe this lady heard her.
We are going to move on. We're going to move on. Yes, we're going to move on now.
I was there with both of them. I saw the whole thing, and I think they forgot that I was there. So if I can make a statement, I will.
Okay, thank you. This is not the time for that, though. We're not having that discussion right now. Thank you.
I missed my report, so I just have a question.
I'm sorry. Okay, Ms. Harris, we're at number 10.
Okay, so I've been asked to provide some information regarding, I think, drinking at events and lunch hour. I just want to make it
Yes,
clear, because
yes.
I know sometimes I go back to the office and I get confused about what exactly we want from you.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that you're asking, do we have a policy regarding that, or?
Yeah, that's basically, is there a policy regarding alcohol, for example?
And I would just like to apologize to the board for my outburst, but I usually take my job very seriously. I'm just not used to people not thinking that I take my job seriously, because I do. And I'd like to apologize to Mr. Ulam, because I think our intent was to try to explain to him how our processes work. And while I do agree with him that it did go sideways, that's not what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do was to try to explain the processes of the office. And I thought we had good intentions, and I apologize to him if it didn't work out the way we all wanted to.
May I speak to the alcohol? Very
Yes.
Sure.
In your report, we have a rule, a hard and fast rule, that we do not pay for alcohol. So anybody,
I'm sorry,
commissioners
wait a
and
minute.
staff.
We do not pay for alcohol. What does
Right.
that mean?
If you go on a trip, on a business trip representing this district, whether you be an employee or a commissioner, and you have a martini at dinner, we do not pay that.
Okay. My question is this, actually. I'm going to be more specific in my question then. At the Port of Oakland, where I work, we have employee appreciation nights, and we have iced tea and Coca-Cola. Okay? We don't have alcohol. Could the district have at its employee appreciation alcohol? That's my question. Okay, that's
Is it at
policy
night? Is
related.
it during the day or at night?
Our events where I work are during the day. It's a lunchtime event
Okay.
in a park.
Just wanted to,
Commissioner Brennan, is this related to?
it's related to that, just add on really quick, that at the at the holiday, I don't know what it was, employee appreciation dinner, there was alcohol provided, and I didn't know that we had a rule that this district didn't pay for alcohol, so if that's the case, as Commissioner Tucker stated, who paid for the alcohol we drank at that big dinner?
Did we pay for it?
No.
Well,
We don't pay.
who paid for it? Because I didn't pay for it.
Maybe somebody bought it.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't pay for it.
Okay, can we have that follow-up question with regard, packaged with my question? I mean, in this whole, what I'm going to call alcohol discussion, we'll have this reported out. Okay. Thank you. I just want to keep this meeting moving forward. Anything else from Ms. Harris? Ms. Harris, anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm too sorry to have skipped over you. We are at committee reports, for which I don't think we have any. Okay, so now we are at commission statements. So commissioners, well, I'm going to start on my left. Commissioner Holsinger.
There's always lots of things to say, but I think tonight I'll just wish everybody a happy holiday.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Caravano.
I have some questions about the commercial activity permits for non-leasing fish fires. At our last meeting, the general manager stated that essentially, correct me if I get this wrong, Mr. Brunel, but what I understood was that At this time, the policy for commercial activity permits for non-leased fish fires and their fees involved in that policy, that is not being actively enforced, and the fees are not being collected. So we have had this policy since 2012 with zero enforcement, zero fee collection. And I'm wondering why we have this policy and if we should remove this policy since it suggests that we should collect, it states that we should collect fees which are identical to the fish fires fees. So it's the same fee structure plus a $250 permit. We are requiring that the fish fires pay the fees, but it's a double standard when we aren't requiring that the non-leasee fish fires pay the fees. So there's an inconsistency there that doesn't seem right, and it also doesn't seem like a public agency should have a policy that requires fees and not enforce it. If it's unenforceable, I think we should get rid of the policy. And apparently the staff has no idea how to enforce it because General Manager Grinnell stated that repeatedly, that they have no clue how to enforce this policy. So I'm concerned about that, and I know I've raised this issue with President Bernardo. So at a future meeting, I will be requesting that this be put on the agenda to have some resolution, unless General Manager Grinnell has an update that includes a resolution sooner. Is there any update there?
For Commissioner Brennan and the rest of the board and the public, I'll remind you that you got this item on the previous board agenda. We provided a status report of it. You got that report, so you know the situation. More than that, you just sent me an email with a list of questions. I responded and said those are good questions and they need to be answered before we implement that thing. That's the state of affairs with things, and I take issue with the way you characterize my response. You do this continuously, and I really find it objectionable.
What is it about what I said that is not accurate?
That I don't have a clue about this. That is simply not true.
I didn't say you, I said the staff.
That is also not true.
Okay,
Well, it is, can I read what you said here? You said,
okay, I'm going to...
we cannot proceed until these questions are addressed, but you have no information about how to implement it.
Okay, order please. We're not going to have this conversation. Okay? This is not the conversation I want, especially, this is becoming a kind of a, this is not what we're supposed to be talking about.
Could we just clarify the date? He said he was going to provide a state resolution, but he didn't say when.
Point of order, this is the time for commissioner comments, not the time for repartee, requests, or motions, or agendizing any item.
So I'll bring it up in another meeting. It's okay.
Do you have any other commissioner statements? Commissioner Brennan?
Just that I think that the situation with this policy related to commercial activity permits for non-leasing fish fires very much relates and reflects on our current fish buying fees that are being required of our commercial fish fires. And I think there is a direct correlation there, and we are going to be discussing fish buying fees and leases for fish fires in closed session. So I did think it was pertinent tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I just have a couple quick things, and first is, when I was on the South San Francisco Personnel Board, the Civil Service Board, we would periodically go over all of the policies and just update them. For example, for the fire department, it kept saying firemen, and we wanted to make it gender neutral, firefighter, for example. So that's just an example. But with regards to our policies, I know that we have policies that go way, way, way back. In fact, there's one here, I think it was contracts, that severance was spelled wrong, things like that. Is there a mechanism, and I'm not saying I don't want an answer now, okay, but I just want to plant this in your heads, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Is there an opportunity to update all of these antiquated policies so that we could just kind of bring them to the 21st century and kind of, and I'm not making fun of anyone, I'm just saying that I think that it would be good to periodically update policies so that we avoid confusion and, people, wondering, what's going on with certain policies and things like that. That's one. So just wanted to plant that out there. Second of all, want to really quickly, if you'll hear me, read a letter that I got with regards to, I think it's good for the public record because this person couldn't make it to tonight's meeting. They emailed me at 5:06 p.m. Dear President Bernardo, please pass on a hearty dose of appreciation to your commissioners for confidence and foresight in allowing Princeton Water's temporary permission to accept visitors here for lodging. Commissioner Pietro has such a passion for our harbor, is supportive, and always has kind words. Commissioner Holtzinger has vision and understands the potential just using what we have here without further investment and minimal cost for liability. President Bernardo, I applaud your effective efforts in neutralizing miscommunications and uniting your team, as it is great meaning to the grantee you are all united in your decisions. I have already responded to Commissioners Brennan and Tucker, and thank you, happy holidays, Cynthia Kerr, Princeton Waters Maritime Salon. I just wanted to read that because that came in earlier and she couldn't make it. And I just wanted to say, before we go into closed session, it was a tough meeting, I have to say. This was a tough meeting tonight. There were a lot of raw emotions that went back and forth, and I know that I have to improve my Robert's rules, and I am committed to that. It's challenging to have meetings sometimes, and there will be continuously, challenges. This is the halfway point of my presidency, and I want to thank everyone for bearing with me for kind of muddling through it. I've never been president of the Harbor District before, and so I really want to thank you for putting up with it. And I just want to say happy holidays to everyone, and happy New Year, and I will see you all. We'll see all of you in 2014. So now we're going to go into item number 13, which is, we're not in closed session yet. Item number 13, technically we have to identify a district real property negotiator before we go into closed session, correct? Okay, so we're going to, right now, for the purposes of this process, designate district real property negotiator Peter Grinnell for closed session.
Move to go into closed session.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor of going into closed session?
Aye.
All opposed?
I can't vote for that, the way that you framed it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So we were supposed to vote for the real property negotiator, is that what we're doing?
Just designate? Right.
No, we were supposed to vote to designate the real property negotiator.
Point of order, that is not what you were doing. You are merely identifying who your agenda already shows to the property negotiator. The motion was to move into closed session.
My apologies, to go into closed session.
The Brown Act states that we have to identify a real property negotiator as a board, which means we should vote to identify a real property negotiator, and that's not what we've done here tonight. So that is a problem.
Can you also explain that?
Commissioner Brennan, I disagree with that. For decades, you have identified Mr. Grinnell as your real property negotiator. Your agenda identifies him as that. That is your real property negotiator is this.
And Ms. Savory, correct me if I'm wrong, for the purposes of going into closed session, I understand that that's sort of the pro forma, but that once we're in closed session, if we choose to appoint another real property negotiator, we can do that, can we not? Okay, so I just wanted to, for the purpose of going into closed session, that's what this is about. It's not, we're not putting ourselves into any particular corner, if you will.
Correct.
Okay, so
I'd just like to say for the minutes that I object to going into closed session without having a vote to identify the real property negotiator. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay, so again, the motion was regarding closed session. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, one, so 4 ayes, one no, motion carries. We're going into closed session.
Why is it,